In the heart of the ancient Maya civilization, beneath the towering pyramids and dense jungle canopies, a startling ritual unfolded, one that would challenge everything we think we know about devotion and sacrifice. Picture this: a ruler, adorned in ceremonial garb, pierces their own flesh to offer their lifeblood to the gods. This wasn't an act of desperation, but a deliberate, sacred act believed to sustain the balance of the cosmos. These bloodletting ceremonies, though shocking to modern sensibilities, reveal a profound truth about humanity: our willingness to endure unimaginable pain in the name of faith, power, and survival. But what drove these civilizations to such extremes? Why did they see martyrdom and self-sacrifice as necessary, even honorable? Today, we'll journey through 35 extraordinary examples of sacrificial rites and martyrdoms from forgotten civilizations, uncovering the hidden stories of societies that shaped their worlds through acts of unimaginable devotion. From the Mayas' bloodletting rituals to the self-immolation of Buddhist monks, each story offers a window into the beliefs, fears, and hopes that defined these ancient cultures. Together, we'll explore the lengths humans went to honor their gods, protect their communities, and leave a lasting legacy, stories that are as haunting as they are enlightening. Ready to dive into the mysteries of the past? Let's begin. Among the many threads that weave through the tapestry of human history, few are as striking or as unsettling as the concept of martyrdom and sacrifice. These practices were not confined to one corner of the world or a single era. They emerged independently across civilizations, from the deserts of ancient Egypt to the jungles of Mesoamerica. At their core, these acts were driven by a universal belief that the survival of the community, the favor of the gods, or the balance of the cosmos depended on the ultimate offering: human life. But what lies beneath this grim yet strangely unifying phenomenon? To understand, we must step into the minds of those ancient societies where the line between life and death, sacrifice and salvation was often blurred. Take the Aztecs, for instance. Their worldview was shaped by a profound sense of cosmic duty. They believed the sun god Huitzilopochtli required a steady stream of human hearts to fuel his journey across the sky. Without these sacrifices, the sun would cease to rise, plunging the world into eternal darkness. For the Aztecs, this wasn't just a myth, it was a matter of survival. The act of offering a human heart wasn't merely an act of violence, it was a sacred exchange, a way to maintain the fragile order of the universe. And yet, this wasn't unique to the Aztecs. Across the globe, from the Celts of Europe to the Shang dynasty of China, societies engaged in rituals that demanded the ultimate price. Why? Because these acts were deeply symbolic, rooted in the belief that the individual could transcend their mortal existence to become something greater, a bridge between the human and the divine. But the motivations behind these practices weren't purely spiritual. On a sociological level, sacrifice often served as a tool for unity and control. In times of crisis, famine, war, or natural disaster, the act of offering a life could rally a community, reinforcing shared values and collective purpose. It was a way to assert authority, to demonstrate power, and to remind people of their place within the larger order. And for the individuals who willingly gave their lives, martyrdom could be a path to eternal glory, their names remembered long after their bodies were gone. These weren't just acts of desperation, they were calculated, deeply meaningful expressions of faith and identity. As we move forward, we'll explore how these universal themes played out in specific civilizations, each with its own unique rituals and beliefs. From the blood-soaked temples of the Aztecs to the serene yet equally harrowing practices of Buddhist monks, we'll uncover the stories of those who gave everything not out of fear, but out of a profound sense of duty. These tales remind us that sacrifice in all its forms is one of the most enduring and complex facets of human history. And as we delve deeper, we'll begin to see how these ancient acts still echo in the world around us today. Religion has long been the lens through which humanity interprets the world, and for many ancient civilizations, it was also the driving force behind their most extreme acts of devotion. At the heart of sacrificial rites lay a profound belief in reciprocity, the idea that to receive divine favor, one must first give something of equal or greater value. And what could be more valuable than life itself? For these societies, the gods were not distant, indifferent beings. They were active participants in the world, capable of shaping fate, controlling the harvest, and determining the outcome of wars. To appease them, to earn their protection, required more than prayers or offerings of grain. It demanded blood, pain, and sometimes even death. This concept of reciprocity wasn't just spiritual, it was deeply practical. Many sacrificial rituals were tied to the rhythms of the natural world. Agricultural cycles, for instance, played a significant role in shaping when and how sacrifices were performed. In societies dependent on farming, the success of a harvest could mean the difference between life and death for an entire community. To ensure fertile fields and abundant crops, offerings were made to gods of rain, sun, and earth. In some cases, these offerings included human lives, believed to nourish the soil and guarantee a bountiful yield. Similarly, warfare often prompted sacrifices, as leaders sought divine intervention to secure victory. And cosmic events, eclipses, comets, or the changing of seasons, were seen as moments when the god's power was most palpable, demanding acts of devotion to maintain balance. But what's perhaps most striking is how these practices were woven into the very fabric of daily life. Sacrificial rites weren't reserved for rare, extraordinary occasions. They were regular, even routine events, integral to the community's survival and identity. They reinforced social hierarchies, with priests and rulers often acting as intermediaries between the people and the gods. They also provided a sense of control in an unpredictable world, offering a way to influence forces that were otherwise beyond human understanding. For those who participated, whether willingly or not, these acts were not just about death, they were about renewal, about ensuring that life in all its forms could continue. One of the most vivid examples of this interplay between religion and sacrifice can be found in the ancient Carthaginian civilization. Nestled along the Mediterranean coast, Carthage was a thriving city-state known for its wealth, trade, and military prowess. But beneath its prosperity lay a darker tradition, the ritual sacrifice of infants to the god Baal Hammon. According to historical accounts, parents would bring their firstborn children to the temple, where priests would place them on the outstretched arms of a bronze statue. The children would then fall into a fiery pit below, their lives offered in exchange for divine protection and prosperity. While modern scholars debate the extent of these practices, the evidence suggests that for the Carthaginians, this grim ritual was a sacred duty, a way to secure the favor of their gods and ensure the survival of their people. As we move deeper into the stories of forgotten civilizations, we'll see how these themes of religion, reciprocity, and renewal played out in different contexts. Each society had its own unique beliefs and rituals, but they all shared a common thread: the conviction that sacrifice, no matter how extreme, was a necessary act of devotion. And as we explore these practices, we'll begin to understand not just the beliefs that drove them, but also the profound ways they shaped the cultures that embraced them. High in the Andes, where the air thins and the peaks pierce the heavens, the Inca civilization carried out one of the most poignant and enigmatic sacrificial rituals in history, the Capacocha. This practice, deeply rooted in the Inca's spiritual worldview, involved the offering of children to the gods. But this wasn't a random or brutal act, it was a meticulously orchestrated ceremony, steeped in reverence and purpose. These children, often between the ages of 6 and 15, were chosen not for punishment but for honor. They were seen as pure, untainted by the impurities of the world, making them the perfect intermediaries between the human realm and the divine. The selection process itself was a sacred event. Children from across the empire, including those from noble families, were chosen for their beauty, health, and perceived spiritual connection. Once selected, they were treated with the utmost care and respect. They were adorned in fine garments, fed lavish meals, and celebrated as if they were royalty. This period of preparation wasn't just about physical comfort. It was a spiritual journey, one that would culminate in their transformation into sacred beings. For the Inca, these children weren't being sent to their deaths, they were being elevated to a higher plane, becoming eternal guardians of their people. The final stage of the Capacocha ritual was as awe-inspiring as it was solemn. The children, accompanied by priests and community leaders, embarked on a ceremonial journey to the summit of sacred mountains. These peaks were considered the dwelling places of the gods, places where the earthly and divine realms intersected. The journey itself was a test of endurance, both physical and spiritual, symbolizing the transition from the mortal world to the sacred. Upon reaching the summit, the children were given a ceremonial drink that induced a deep, trance-like state. In this state, they were believed to transcend their mortal forms, becoming one with the gods. They were then carefully placed in tombs, often with offerings of gold, textiles, and food, ensuring they would continue to serve as protectors and mediators in the afterlife. What's striking about the Capacocha is not just the act of sacrifice itself, but the profound belief that these children were not lost, they were elevated. To the Inca, these sacrifices were acts of profound reciprocity, a way to ensure the gods' continued favor and the stability of the empire. The children were seen as living bridges between the human and divine, their sacrifice a necessary offering to maintain cosmic balance. And while the practice may seem distant and foreign to us today, it speaks to a universal human impulse, the desire to connect with something greater than ourselves, even at the greatest cost. From the icy peaks of the Andes, we now turn to a vastly different landscape, the arid deserts of the Middle East, where another civilization embraced the idea of sacrifice in a way that was equally profound, yet strikingly different. Here, the ancient Carthaginians practiced rituals that, like the Capacocha, were rooted in the belief that the gods demanded the ultimate offering. But unlike the Inca, who saw sacrifice as a sacred elevation, the Carthaginians viewed it as a desperate plea for survival in a harsh and unforgiving world. And as we'll see, this contrast reveals just how deeply cultural context shapes the meaning of sacrifice. The ancient Celts, shrouded in mist and mystery, practiced a ritual so chilling that it has echoed through the ages, the Wicker Man sacrifice. Picture this: a towering, human-shaped structure made of woven wood, filled with people and animals, set ablaze in a fiery spectacle. To the Celts, this wasn't mere destruction. It was a sacred act, a way to offer life to the gods in exchange for prosperity, protection, or victory. The Wicker Man stands as one of the most haunting symbols of Celtic spirituality, a testament to their belief in the power of sacrifice to shape their world. Roman historians, particularly Julius Caesar, provide the most vivid accounts of these rituals. According to Caesar, the Celts constructed massive wicker structures, sometimes in the shape of giants, and filled them with living beings, criminals, prisoners of war, or even volunteers. The fires, once lit, consumed everything within, sending smoke and ash into the heavens as an offering to the gods. Caesar's descriptions paint a grim picture, but they also raise questions. How accurate were these accounts? Were they influenced by Roman bias, designed to portray the Celts as barbaric and uncivilized? or did they capture a genuine, albeit brutal, aspect of Celtic culture? Scholars have long debated the purpose of the Wicker Man. Some believe it was tied to the agricultural cycle, a way to ensure a bountiful harvest by offering life back to the earth. Others suggest it was a wartime ritual intended to secure victory by appeasing gods of battle and destruction. Still, others see it as a form of purification, a way to cleanse the community of evil or misfortune. What's clear is that the Wicker Man wasn't an act of senseless violence. It was a deeply symbolic practice, rooted in the Celts' understanding of the world as a place of constant exchange between the human and divine. For the Romans, these rituals were both horrifying and fascinating. They saw the Wicker Man as evidence of the Celts' savagery, a justification for their conquest and civilizing mission. Yet, in their accounts, there's also a hint of awe, a recognition that these practices were not merely cruel but profoundly meaningful. The Celts, in their eyes, were a people who took their spirituality to extremes, willing to make the ultimate sacrifice for their beliefs. This outsider perspective, while often biased, offers a window into how these rites were perceived by those who didn't share the same worldview. As we reflect on the Wicker Man, it's impossible not to feel a mix of horror and curiosity. What drove the Celts to such extremes? What did they hope to gain from these fiery offerings? And how did these rituals shape their identity as a people? While we may never fully understand the motivations behind the Wicker Man, one thing is certain. It stands as a powerful reminder of the lengths to which humans will go in pursuit of meaning, connection, and survival. Turning our gaze now to another civilization, we find practices that, while different in form, share a similar thread of devotion and sacrifice. In the dense jungles of Mesoamerica, the Maya performed bloodletting rituals that were no less intense, no less sacred, and no less profound in their significance. These acts, though less dramatic than the Wicker Man, reveal another facet of humanity's complex relationship with sacrifice, one that we'll explore as we continue our journey through the extraordinary martyrdoms and sacrificial rites of forgotten civilizations. Deep within the shadowed temples of the ancient Maya, a ritual of profound spiritual significance unfolded, one that blurred the lines between devotion and endurance. Unlike the grand, fiery spectacles of the Celts or the solemn mountain ceremonies of the Inca, the Maya's bloodletting rituals were deeply personal, intimate acts of sacrifice. Kings, queens, and nobles would pierce their tongues, ears, or even their genitals, allowing their blood to flow as an offering to the gods. To modern eyes, this may seem shocking, even incomprehensible. But for the Maya, it was a sacred duty, a way to bridge the gap between the human and divine realms and ensure the continued harmony of the cosmos. Archaeological evidence provides a vivid window into these practices. Intricate carvings on stelae and temple walls depict rulers performing bloodletting rituals, often accompanied by elaborate ceremonies. One striking example comes from the ancient city of Yaxchilan, where a limestone lintel shows Lady Zoc, a powerful queen, pulling a thorn-lined rope through her tongue. Her blood drips onto bark paper, which is then burned, sending the offering skyward to the gods. These images are more than just historical records. They're testaments to the Maya's belief in the transformative power of sacrifice. Blood wasn't merely a physical substance, it was life itself, the very essence of existence. By offering it, the Maya rulers weren't just performing a ritual. They were engaging in a profound act of communication, opening a dialogue with the divine. But why such extreme measures? For the Maya, the world was a delicate balance of opposing forces, life and death, day and night, creation and destruction. To maintain this balance, the gods required sustenance, and what could be more nourishing than the lifeblood of their earthly representatives? Bloodletting wasn't just about appeasing the gods, it was about reaffirming the ruler's role as a mediator between the human and spiritual realms. Through their pain and sacrifice, they demonstrated their commitment to their people and their willingness to endure for the greater good. It was a deeply symbolic act, one that reinforced social hierarchies and spiritual authority. The tools used in these rituals further highlight their significance. Archaeologists have uncovered intricately carved obsidian blades, stingray spines, and other ceremonial instruments, often adorned with symbols of power and divinity. These weren't ordinary tools, they were sacred objects imbued with spiritual meaning and used only in the most important of ceremonies. The precision and care with which they were crafted reflect the reverence the Maya held for these acts of devotion. Even the pain itself was seen as transformative, a necessary step in the process of spiritual renewal. What's perhaps most striking about the Maya's bloodletting rituals is how they reveal a universal human truth, the belief that suffering can be redemptive. For the Maya, pain wasn't something to be avoided, it was a path to enlightenment, a way to connect with the divine and ensure the survival of their world. And while these practices may seem alien to us today, they remind us of the lengths to which humans will go in their search for meaning and connection. From the intimate bloodletting rituals of the Maya, we now turn to a practice that was far more communal, yet no less significant. In the heart of ancient Mesopotamia, the Akkadian Empire carried out sacrifices that involved entire communities, binding them together in shared acts of devotion. These ceremonies, though different in form, were rooted in the same fundamental belief: that sacrifice, whether personal or collective, was a necessary act of faith. And as we'll see, these communal rituals offer yet another perspective on humanity's complex relationship with the divine. In the bustling port city of ancient Carthage, where the Mediterranean breeze carried the scent of trade and prosperity, a darker tradition cast a long shadow over its golden streets. Here, the Carthaginians practiced a form of sacrifice that remains one of the most debated and unsettling in human history: the offering of infants to their god Baal Hammon. This ritual, known as the Toffet, has left behind a haunting archaeological legacy: thousands of urns containing the charred remains of children, buried beneath sacred grounds. But what drove this powerful civilization to such extremes? And how did these sacrifices shape the political and social fabric of Carthaginian society? The Toffet, a term derived from biblical references, refers to the burial sites where these sacrifices took place. Excavations in modern-day Tunisia have uncovered rows upon rows of small urns, each containing the ashes of infants and animals. Inscriptions found at these sites often include dedications to Baal Hammon and Tanit, the city's chief deities, along with vows from parents offering their children in exchange for divine favor. The imagery is stark and deeply evocative, a society so deeply intertwined with its gods that it was willing to offer its most precious resource, its future generations, to secure prosperity and protection. But the scale and purpose of these sacrifices have sparked fierce debate among historians and archaeologists. Some argue that the Toffet was primarily a burial ground for children who died naturally, with the dedications serving as a form of spiritual insurance for their safe passage to the afterlife. Others, however, point to the sheer volume of remains and the presence of animal bones, suggesting that these were deliberate acts of sacrifice. The truth likely lies somewhere in between, a complex interplay of religious devotion, social obligation, and cultural symbolism. What's clear is that these practices were not random or arbitrary. They were deeply embedded in the Carthaginian worldview, reflecting a belief system that saw sacrifice as a necessary act of reciprocity with the divine. Beyond the spiritual implications, these sacrifices also played a crucial role in Carthage's political and social structures. The act of offering a child to Baal Hammon wasn't just a private, familial decision. It was a public declaration of loyalty and piety. For the elite, it was a way to demonstrate their commitment to the gods and, by extension, their fitness to lead. For ordinary citizens, it was a means of asserting their place within the community, a shared act of devotion that reinforced collective identity. In a society where religion and governance were deeply intertwined, these rituals served as a powerful tool for maintaining order and cohesion. Yet, the practice was not without its tensions. The decision to sacrifice a child would have been an intensely personal and emotional one, raising questions about consent, coercion, and societal pressures. How did parents reconcile their grief with their faith? Were there those who resisted, or was dissent unthinkable in a culture so deeply rooted in tradition? These are questions that, while impossible to answer definitively, invite us to reflect on the complexities of human belief and the ways in which societies navigate the demands of the sacred and the secular. As we piece together the story of Carthage's Toffet, we're reminded that sacrifice in all its forms is rarely simple. It's a reflection of the values, fears, and aspirations of a civilization, a lens through which we can better understand the forces that shape human behavior. And as we move forward, we'll see how these themes of devotion, reciprocity, and social cohesion played out in other cultures, each with its own unique rituals and beliefs. But for now, the legacy of Carthage's mass sacrifices stands as a stark reminder of the lengths to which humans will go in their search for meaning, connection, and survival. The Vikings, fierce seafarers and warriors of the north, carried their dead into the afterlife with a blaze of fire and grandeur. Picture this, a longship laden with treasures, weapons, and the body of a fallen hero, set adrift on the open sea. As the ship is engulfed in flames, the sky glows with an otherworldly light, a signal to the gods that a warrior of great renown is on their way to Valhalla. This was no ordinary farewell. It was a Viking funeral pyre, a ritual steeped in honor, belief, and at times the ultimate sacrifice. At the heart of these ceremonies was the Vikings' profound belief in Valhalla, the great hall of Odin, where warriors who died bravely in battle would feast and fight until the end of days. To reach this hallowed place, the deceased had to be sent off in a manner befitting their status. Funeral pyres were not just about cremation, they were elaborate performances designed to honor the dead and ensure their passage to the afterlife. The more extravagant the pyre, the greater the chance of catching the gods' attention. Ships, often the pride of Viking warriors, were sometimes burned alongside their owners, symbolizing their continued journey into the next realm. Weapons, armor, and even animals were added to the flames, all intended to serve the deceased in the afterlife. But in some cases, the sacrifices went further. Human companions, often slaves or volunteers, were included to accompany the fallen on their journey. Archaeological discoveries have shed light on these practices, offering glimpses into the Viking world. One of the most famous examples comes from the Oseberg ship burial in Norway, where two women likely of high status were laid to rest with an astonishing array of grave goods, from sleds and tapestries to animal remains. While this particular burial did not involve a fiery pyre, it reflects the same underlying belief that the dead needed provisions and companions for their journey. Other sites, such as the boat graves at Sutton Hoo in England, echo this tradition, blending Viking customs with local influences. The sagas, epic tales of Viking heroes and gods, provide further insight into these rituals. In the saga of the Volsungs, the hero Sigurd is cremated on a grand pyre, surrounded by his treasures and loyal followers. These stories, though embellished with myth, capture the essence of Viking funeral practices, the blending of honor, sacrifice, and a deep connection to the divine. For the Vikings, death was not an end but a transition, a passage to a greater existence, and the funeral pyre was the bridge that carried them there. Yet, these rituals were not just about the individual, they were also a reflection of the community. The spectacle of a funeral pyre served to unite the living, reinforcing social bonds and collective identity. It was a reminder of shared values, courage, loyalty, and the pursuit of glory, and a celebration of the life that had been lived. In this way, the funeral pyre was as much for the living as it was for the dead, a communal act of remembrance and reverence. As we shift our focus from the grand, fiery spectacles of Viking funerals, we turn to a practice that was deeply personal, yet equally profound. In the highlands of ancient Peru, the Inca civilization carried out a form of sacrifice that was intimate and deliberate, a testament to their belief in the sacred bond between humanity and the divine. These rituals, though far removed from the roaring flames of Viking pyres, reveal another facet of humanity's enduring relationship with sacrifice, a relationship we'll explore as we continue our journey through the extraordinary martyrdoms of forgotten civilizations. In the heart of ancient India, a practice emerged that would come to symbolize both the depths of devotion and the weight of societal expectation, the ritual of Sati. This act, where widows would immolate themselves on their husband's funeral pyre, was seen as the ultimate expression of loyalty and piety. But beneath the surface of this seemingly selfless act lay a complex web of cultural, religious, and social forces that shaped its existence and its eventual abolition. To understand Sati, we must first step into the world of ancient Indian society, where gender roles and religious beliefs were deeply intertwined. In Hindu tradition, marriage was considered a sacred bond, one that united not just two individuals but two souls for eternity. A widow's life, by contrast, was often seen as incomplete, even cursed. The act of Sati was framed as a voluntary choice, a way for a woman to transcend her earthly suffering and join her husband in the afterlife. But was it truly voluntary? Historical records suggest that societal pressures ranging from economic hardship to outright coercion often played a significant role in compelling women to take this drastic step. The religious justifications for Sati were rooted in interpretations of ancient texts, which some argued glorified the act as a path to spiritual liberation. Stories of devoted wives who chose to follow their husbands into the afterlife were held up as examples of ideal womanhood, reinforcing the belief that a woman's ultimate duty was to her spouse. Yet, these narratives were often selective, ignoring the broader context of the texts and overlooking the voices of those who resisted or questioned the practice. Over time, Sati became not just a personal act of devotion but a symbol of societal expectations, a reflection of the rigid gender roles that defined life in ancient India. The practice of Sati was not without its critics, even in its earliest days. Reformers and scholars within Indian society questioned its morality and necessity, arguing that it contradicted the core principles of compassion and non-violence found in Hindu teachings. By the 19th century, these voices grew louder, culminating in the British colonial government's banning of Sati in 1829. This abolition marked a turning point, sparking debates about tradition, modernity, and the role of women in Indian society that continue to resonate today. But the legacy of Sati lingers not just in historical records but in cultural memory. It serves as a reminder of the ways in which gender roles have shaped and sometimes constrained human behavior. Across civilizations, sacrificial rites often carried gendered implications, reflecting societal norms about who could or should make the ultimate offering. In the case of Sati, women were both the subjects and the symbols of sacrifice, their bodies becoming sites of both devotion and control. As we reflect on the practice of Sati, it's impossible not to see parallels in other societies where gender roles influenced the nature and meaning of sacrifice. From the Inca's Capacocha, where young girls were chosen for their purity, to the Carthaginian Toffet, where mothers offered their infants, the intersections of gender and sacrifice reveal much about the values and priorities of these ancient cultures. These practices challenge us to consider not just the acts themselves, but the systems of belief and power that supported them, and the ways in which they continue to shape our understanding of the past. From the fiery pyres of Sati, we now turn to a practice that, while vastly different in form, shares a similar thread of sacrifice and societal expectation. In the icy reaches of the Andes, the Inca civilization carried out rituals that were no less profound in their symbolism and impact. These sacrifices, like those of ancient India, reveal the intricate ways in which gender, power, and belief intersect in the human experience. And as we explore these connections, we'll gain a deeper understanding of the forces that have shaped our world and the stories of those who lived and died within it. In the ancient cities of Mesoamerica, where towering pyramids cast long shadows over bustling plazas, a game was played that held the fate of its players in the balance. This wasn't just a sport, it was a sacred ritual, a life-or-death spectacle known as the Mesoamerican ball game. Imagine the scene: two teams, clad in protective gear made of leather and wood, battling fiercely on a narrow stone court. The objective was simple yet grueling: keep a heavy rubber ball in play without using hands or feet, only hips, elbows, and shoulders. But for some, the stakes were far higher than victory. In certain instances, the losing team, or sometimes even the winning team, was sacrificed to the gods. This wasn't a punishment, it was an honor, a sacred duty that transcended the boundaries of life and death. The ball game, known as pits to the Maya and tlachtli to the Aztecs, was more than just entertainment. It was a microcosm of the cosmic struggle between light and darkness, life and death. The ball itself symbolized the sun, its movement across the court echoing the sun's journey across the sky. The court, often shaped like an eye with sloping walls, represented the boundaries between the earthly and spiritual realms. For the Maya, the game was also tied to the myth of the hero twins, who descended into the underworld and triumphed over the gods of death. By reenacting this myth, players became part of a divine narrative, their actions shaping the fate of their world. But why sacrifice? In Mesoamerican cosmology, blood was the ultimate offering, the life force that sustained the gods and maintained cosmic order. The act of sacrifice wasn't seen as an end but as a transformation, a way for the individual to become one with the divine. For the losing team, this was a chance to achieve immortality, their deaths ensuring the continued favor of the gods and the prosperity of their people. In some cases, even the victors were sacrificed, their triumph seen as a sign of divine favor, making them the ultimate offering. Archaeological evidence paints a vivid picture of these practices. At the ancient city of Chichen Itzá, the Great Ball Court stretches over 500 feet, its walls adorned with carvings depicting players and scenes of sacrifice. One striking relief shows a player kneeling before a figure holding a ceremonial knife, his head severed and streams of blood transforming into serpents, a powerful symbol of rebirth and renewal. These images remind us that the ball game wasn't just a physical competition. It was a spiritual journey, one that demanded the ultimate commitment from its participants. The Aztecs, too, embraced the ball game as a sacred tradition. For them, it was a way to resolve disputes, honor the gods, and even train warriors. The stakes were high and the consequences were real. But for those who faced sacrifice, the act was not one of fear but of pride. They believed that their deaths would bring rain, ensure bountiful harvests, and maintain the balance of the cosmos. In a world where the gods were ever present and ever demanding, sacrifice was a necessary act of devotion, a way to ensure the survival of the community. As we reflect on the Mesoamerican ball game, it's impossible not to marvel at the complexity of its symbolism and the depth of its meaning. This was no mere sport, it was a profound expression of faith, a reminder that life and death are intertwined in ways that transcend our understanding. And as we move from the communal spectacle of the ball game, we turn to a more solitary form of martyrdom, one that reveals yet another facet of humanity's enduring relationship with sacrifice. In the quiet stillness of a Jain monastery, a monk sits in deep meditation, preparing for a journey that transcends the boundaries of life and death. This is not an act of despair, but a deliberate, sacred practice known as Salakana, a voluntary fast to the end of one's life. For the Jain community, this act represents the ultimate expression of non-attachment, a way to purify the soul and break free from the cycle of rebirth. But to outsiders, it can seem deeply unsettling, even incomprehensible. How can such an act be seen as sacred? To understand, we must step into the world of Jain philosophy, where the body is seen not as an end, but as a temporary vessel for the eternal soul. At the heart of Salakana lies the principle of ahimsa, or non-violence, a cornerstone of Jain belief. This isn't just about avoiding harm to others, it's about minimizing harm to oneself, including the harm caused by attachment to the physical world. By willingly relinquishing food, water, and eventually life itself, Jain monks aim to shed the layers of karma that bind them to the material realm. This isn't a sudden decision, it's a carefully considered process, undertaken only when the individual feels they have fulfilled their earthly duties and are ready to embrace spiritual liberation. The act is performed with mindfulness and reverence, often accompanied by prayers and rituals that honor the sanctity of the journey. Yet Salakana is not without controversy. In modern times, it has sparked debates about the ethics of voluntary death, with some viewing it as a form of suicide and others as a profound spiritual practice. Legal systems in countries like India have grappled with how to classify this act, balancing respect for religious freedom with concerns about coercion or societal pressures. For Jains, however, Salakana is not about ending life, it's about transcending it. It's a way to affirm the belief that the soul is eternal, and that liberation from the cycle of birth and death is the ultimate goal. This perspective challenges us to rethink our own views on life, death, and the purpose of existence. What's striking about Salakana is how it embodies the Jain ideal of a parigraha, or non-possession. By letting go of the body, the monk also lets go of all worldly attachments, wealth, relationships, even the desire for life itself. This act of renunciation is seen as the highest form of spiritual discipline, a way to achieve moksha or liberation. It's a reminder that, in the Jain worldview, the physical body is not the essence of who we are. It's merely a temporary shell, a means to an end. And that end is the realization of the soul's true nature, free from the burdens of karma and rebirth. As we reflect on the practice of Salakana, it's impossible not to see parallels in other spiritual traditions, where martyrdom and self-sacrifice are often tied to the pursuit of enlightenment. Whether it's the asceticism of Buddhist monks, the self-immolation of Christian martyrs, or the fasting of Hindu saints, these acts share a common thread, the belief that the physical world is fleeting and that true liberation lies beyond it. For the Jain monks who undertake Salakana, this is not an end but a beginning, a transformation that carries them closer to the eternal. From the serene austerity of Jain monasteries, we now turn to a practice that, while vastly different in form, reflects a similar devotion to spiritual ideals. In the rugged landscapes of ancient Tibet, Buddhist monks embraced another form of self-sacrifice, one that sought to illuminate the path to enlightenment through the ultimate act of devotion. These practices, though distinct in their methods, reveal the profound ways in which humanity has sought to transcend the physical and connect with the divine, a journey we'll explore as we continue our examination of extraordinary martyrdoms and sacrificial rites. In the fertile plains of ancient China, where the Yellow River carved its path through the heart of civilization, the Shang dynasty rose to power around the 16th century BC. This era, often referred to as China's Bronze Age, was marked by remarkable advancements in art, technology, and governance. But beneath the surface of this flourishing society lay a darker tradition, the practice of human sacrifice. These rituals were not acts of random violence. They were deeply symbolic, rooted in the Shang's belief in the afterlife and the divine right of their rulers. To ensure their kings continued to reign in the next world, the Shang offered the ultimate tribute: human lives. Archaeological discoveries have unveiled the scale and intensity of these practices. Among the most revealing artifacts are the oracle bones, inscribed with ancient Chinese characters that provide a glimpse into the Shang's spiritual and political world. These bones, often turtle shells or ox scapulae, were used in divination rituals to communicate with the gods and ancestors. Questions about harvests, warfare, and royal decisions were etched onto the bones, which were then heated until they cracked. The patterns of these cracks were interpreted as answers from the divine. But alongside these inquiries, many oracle bones also record the names and numbers of individuals sacrificed, often in staggering quantities. Some inscriptions mention hundreds of victims offered in a single ceremony, a chilling testament to the Shang's commitment to their spiritual obligations. The burial sites of Shang rulers further illuminate the role of human sacrifice in their society. At Yingzhou, the last capital of the Shang dynasty, archaeologists have uncovered elaborate tombs filled with treasures, jade ornaments, bronze vessels, and chariots. But these tombs also contain the remains of sacrificial victims, often arranged in precise patterns around the ruler's burial chamber. These individuals, many of whom were prisoners of war or slaves, were believed to serve the king in the afterlife, accompanying him as servants, guards, or even companions. The sheer number of victims, sometimes exceeding 100 per tomb, underscores the magnitude of these rituals and the power they symbolized. What's striking about the Shang's practices is how they intertwined spirituality with politics. Human sacrifice wasn't just a religious act, it was a display of authority, a way for rulers to demonstrate their connection to the divine and their ability to command life and death. By offering human lives, the Shang kings reinforced their status as intermediaries between the earthly and spiritual realms, solidifying their hold on power. These rituals also served a practical purpose. They deterred rebellion and instilled fear among enemies, both at home and abroad. In a society where warfare was frequent and borders were fluid, the ability to sacrifice prisoners of war sent a clear message: defiance would not be tolerated. Yet, these practices were not without their complexities. While the victims were often prisoners or slaves, some may have been volunteers, motivated by the promise of honor or a better existence in the afterlife. The Shang believed that death was not an end but a transition, and for those chosen to accompany the king, it was a sacred duty. This duality of coercion and consent, brutality and reverence, reveals the intricate ways in which the Shang navigated the demands of their spiritual and political world. As we reflect on the human sacrifices of the Shang dynasty, it's impossible not to see echoes in other civilizations, where the line between the sacred and the secular was often blurred. From the Aztecs to the Carthaginians, the act of offering human lives was a recurring theme, a way for societies to assert their power, appease their gods, and confront the mysteries of existence. The Shang's rituals, though distant in time, remind us of the profound ways in which belief shapes behavior and how the quest for meaning can lead to both creation and destruction. From the grand tombs of the Shang, we now turn to a practice that, while less overtly violent, reveals another layer of humanity's complex relationship with sacrifice. In the windswept steppes of Central Asia, the Scythians carried out rituals that were no less profound in their symbolism and impact, offering a glimpse into a world where life, death, and the divine were inextricably linked. The Aztecs, a civilization synonymous with grandeur and ritual, carried out one of the most controversial practices in human history: ritual cannibalism. This wasn't an act of savagery or desperation, but a deeply spiritual and symbolic act woven into the fabric of their religious beliefs. Imagine the scene: a sacrificial victim, often a prisoner of war, is offered to the gods in a ceremony that culminates in their heart being ripped out and their body consumed. To modern eyes, this is both shocking and incomprehensible, but for the Aztecs it was a sacred exchange, a way to honor the gods, sustain the cosmos, and draw strength from the divine. At the heart of this practice was the belief that the gods required nourishment to maintain the balance of the universe. Blood, the life force, was the ultimate offering, but the flesh of the victim was also seen as sacred. By consuming it, the Aztecs believed they were absorbing the victim's strength and vitality, transferring their essence to the living. This wasn't an act of gluttony or violence. It was a ritual of renewal, a way to ensure the continued favor of the gods and the survival of their people. The act of cannibalism was deeply symbolic, representing the cyclical nature of life and death, creation and destruction. The psychological impact of these rituals cannot be overstated. For the Aztec priests and warriors who participated, this was not merely a duty, it was a profound spiritual experience. They believed they were engaging directly with the divine, becoming vessels for the gods' power. The act of consuming the flesh was both a physical and metaphysical transformation, a way to bridge the gap between the human and the divine. Yet, for the victims, the experience was undoubtedly one of terror and pain. Captured in battle, they were often treated as honored guests before their sacrifice, given food, drink, and even the opportunity to marry. But this hospitality was a double-edged sword, a way to prepare them for their ultimate role as offerings to the gods. Archaeological evidence, including depictions in codices and carvings, provides a vivid window into these practices. Temples like the Templo Mayor in Tenochtitlan were central to these rituals, their altars stained with the blood of countless victims. The remains of these sacrifices, often found with marks of butchery, confirm the accounts of cannibalism recorded by Spanish conquistadors. Yet, it's important to approach these accounts with caution, as they were often colored by bias and the desire to portray the Aztecs as barbaric. The truth is far more complex, revealing a society that saw sacrifice as a sacred duty, a way to maintain the cosmic order and ensure the survival of their world. What's perhaps most striking about Aztec ritual cannibalism is how it reflects the duality of their worldview. Life and death were not opposites but interconnected, each feeding into the other in an endless cycle. The act of consuming the flesh of a sacrificial victim was both an act of destruction and creation, a way to honor the gods and sustain life. It's a reminder that, for the Aztecs, sacrifice was not just about death, it was about renewal, transformation, and the enduring connection between the human and the divine. From the visceral intensity of Aztec cannibalism, we now turn to a practice that, while less physically consuming, was no less profound in its symbolism. In the ancient kingdom of Dahomey, located in what is now Benin, rituals of sacrifice took on a different form, one that emphasized the power of symbolism and the enduring legacy of the ancestors. These practices, though distinct from those of the Aztecs, reveal yet another facet of humanity's complex relationship with sacrifice, a relationship we'll explore as we continue our journey through the extraordinary martyrdoms of forgotten civilizations. In the sunlit hills of ancient Greece, where philosophy and art flourished, there existed a ritual that revealed a darker, more primal side of their society, the practice of pharmakos. This ritual, often referred to as the scapegoat ceremony, was a profound act of communal purification. Picture this: a person, often an outcast or a criminal, is chosen to bear the sins and misfortunes of the entire community. They are paraded through the streets, beaten with branches, and then either driven out of the city or, in some cases, killed. To modern sensibilities, this might seem cruel and unjust. But for the ancient Greeks, it was a necessary act of renewal, a way to cleanse the community of its collective guilt and suffering. The term pharmakos itself is revealing. It comes from the same root as the word pharmakon, which means both remedy and poison. This duality captures the essence of the ritual. The scapegoat was both a source of harm and a cure. By expelling or sacrificing this individual, the community believed they were purging themselves of whatever evil or misfortune plagued them. It was a symbolic act rooted in the belief that one person's suffering could restore balance and harmony to the many. This idea wasn't unique to Greece. Similar practices can be found in cultures around the world, from the biblical scapegoat sent into the wilderness in ancient Israel to the sacrificial offerings of the Aztecs. What ties these traditions together is the belief in the power of sacrifice to restore order and ensure the well-being of the community. For the Greeks, the pharmakos ritual was often tied to times of crisis, famine, plague, or social unrest. These were moments when the community felt vulnerable, when the gods seemed angry or distant. By offering a scapegoat, they sought to appease the divine and regain control over their fate. The chosen individual, though treated harshly, was also honored in a strange way. They were seen as a savior, someone whose suffering could bring relief to the entire city. This paradoxical role, both reviled and revered, reflects the complexity of human beliefs about sacrifice. It wasn't just about punishment, it was about transformation, about turning chaos into order through an act of profound symbolism. Archaeological and literary evidence provides glimpses into these rituals. The poet Hipponax, for example, describes a pharmakos being beaten with fig branches and driven out of the city, his expulsion marking the end of a period of hardship. Similarly, in the city of Athens, the ritual was performed during the Thargelia, a festival dedicated to Apollo, the god of healing and purification. Here, the scapegoat's role was tied to the agricultural cycle, ensuring a fruitful harvest and a prosperous year ahead. These practices remind us that, for the Greeks, sacrifice wasn't just a religious act, it was a way to navigate the uncertainties of life, to find meaning in the face of adversity. What's striking about the pharmakos ritual is how it reflects the tension between the individual and the collective. The scapegoat, often someone on the margins of society, was both a victim and a hero. Their suffering was a reminder of the fragility of human existence, but also of the resilience of the community. Through their expulsion or death, the city was reborn, its sins washed away and its future secured. This duality of destruction and renewal, of suffering and salvation, is a recurring theme in the history of sacrifice, one that speaks to the depths of human belief and the lengths to which we will go to protect what we hold dear. As we reflect on the pharmakos rituals of ancient Greece, it's impossible not to see parallels in our own world. The idea of the scapegoat, someone who bears the blame for the faults of others, is still very much alive, though it takes different forms. From political leaders to public figures, the act of assigning blame to one individual remains a powerful way to unite a group, even if it comes at great cost. The pharmakos reminds us that sacrifice in all its forms is not just about the past, it's a mirror, reflecting the timeless human struggle to find meaning, balance, and hope in an unpredictable world. From the symbolic expulsion of the pharmakos, we now turn to a practice that, while rooted in a different culture, reveals a similar interplay between sacrifice and communal well-being. In the ancient kingdom of Dahomey, rituals of ancestor worship and symbolic offerings played a central role in maintaining social cohesion and spiritual balance. These practices, though distinct from the scapegoat rituals of Greece, offer yet another perspective on the enduring human quest for harmony and renewal. In the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean, where the horizon stretches endlessly and the waves whisper ancient secrets, the Polynesians developed a ritual that tested the limits of human endurance and faith, fire walking. Imagine standing at the edge of a pit filled with glowing embers, the heat radiating fiercely as you prepare to step barefoot onto the searing coals. For the uninitiated, this might seem like an act of madness, but for the Polynesians, it was a sacred rite, a journey of spiritual purification, and a testament to one's connection with the divine. At its core, fire walking was far more than a physical challenge. It was a deeply spiritual act. The Polynesians believed that the ability to walk unharmed across the burning coals was a sign of favor from the gods. It demonstrated purity of heart, strength of spirit, and unwavering faith. Those who participated were often priests, warriors, or individuals seeking to prove their worthiness for a specific role within the community. The ritual was not just about surviving the ordeal, but about transcending fear and doubt, emerging on the other side with a renewed sense of purpose and divine protection. The preparation for fire walking was as significant as the act itself. Participants underwent rigorous mental and spiritual conditioning, often involving fasting, prayer, and meditation. This period of preparation was essential, as it was believed that only those who were spiritually aligned and mentally focused could withstand the intense heat. The community played a vital role in this process, offering support and encouragement, and the ritual itself became a powerful symbol of unity and collective strength. Fire walking wasn't just an individual test, it was a communal event that reinforced social bonds and shared values. The science behind fire walking is fascinating, though the Polynesians would not have framed it in such terms. Coals, while extremely hot, have a low thermal capacity, meaning they transfer heat slowly. With quick, deliberate steps, participants could traverse the coals without sustaining burns. But to focus solely on the physical mechanics is to miss the point. For the Polynesians, the power of fire walking lay in its symbolism, the triumph of faith over fear, the ability to overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges, and the belief that the human spirit, when aligned with the divine, could achieve the extraordinary. As we reflect on the fire-walking rituals of the Polynesians, it's impossible not to marvel at the resilience and ingenuity of human belief systems. These practices remind us that sacrifice, in its many forms, often serves as a bridge between the physical and the spiritual, the individual and the collective. Fire walking was not just about enduring pain, it was about transformation, about proving one's worthiness to the gods and to the community. And as we turn our attention to a more extreme form of self-sacrifice, we'll see how this theme of transformation continues to shape the stories of those who gave everything in the name of faith and duty. In the dense jungles of Southeast Asia, another civilization embraced a form of devotion that pushed the boundaries of human endurance even further. Here, the practice of self-immolation emerged as a powerful expression of spiritual commitment, a ritual that demanded not just the crossing of hot coals, but the ultimate offering of one's own life. This act, though vastly different in form, shared a common thread with the fire walking of the Polynesians, the belief that sacrifice could transcend the physical and connect the individual with the divine. And as we explore these harrowing yet deeply meaningful practices, we'll uncover the profound ways in which humanity has sought to bridge the gap between the mortal and the eternal. In the misty mountains of Japan, where ancient temples stand as silent witnesses to centuries of devotion, a practice emerged that pushed the boundaries of human endurance and spiritual commitment. Known as Sokushinbutsu, this ritual involved Buddhist monks mummifying themselves alive in pursuit of enlightenment. To modern sensibilities, the idea of willingly undergoing such a grueling process may seem incomprehensible, even horrifying. But for these monks, it was the ultimate expression of faith, a way to transcend the physical and achieve a state of eternal purity. The process of Sokushinbutsu was neither quick nor easy. It began with a strict diet of nuts, seeds, and tree bark, designed to strip the body of fat and moisture over a period of several years. This phase, known as mokujiki, was as much a spiritual discipline as it was a physical one. By denying themselves the comforts of ordinary food, the monks sought to detach from worldly desires, preparing their minds and bodies for the final stage of the ritual. Next, they would consume a toxic tea made from the sap of the oroshi tree, commonly used to lacquer bowls and furniture. This poison, while deadly over time, had a dual purpose. It further dehydrated the body and preserved it from decay, ensuring that the monk's remains would endure as a sacred relic. The final act of Sokushinbatsu was both solemn and deliberate. The monk would enter a small, stone-lined chamber, often beneath a temple, and assume the lotus position, a posture of meditation. Sealed within, they would chant and meditate until their body succumbed to starvation and dehydration. For those who succeeded, their preserved remains would be enshrined, revered as living Buddhas and symbols of spiritual attainment. But success was rare, and the path was fraught with unimaginable suffering. Only a handful of monks are known to have achieved Sokushinbatsu, their mummified bodies still venerated in temples across Japan to this day. What drove these monks to such extremes? At the heart of Sokushinbatsu lies the Buddhist belief in impermanence, the idea that all things, including the body, are transient. By willingly embracing death, the monks sought to transcend the cycle of rebirth, achieving nirvana and freeing themselves from the endless suffering of existence. This act wasn't about self-destruction, it was about liberation, a way to demonstrate the ultimate detachment from the physical world. For the monks, the body was merely a vessel, and Sokushinbatsu was the final step in a lifelong journey toward enlightenment. This practice also reflects the profound connection between martyrdom and religious devotion across cultures. From the self-immolation of Buddhist monks to the sacrificial rites of the Aztecs, the willingness to endure pain and death for spiritual beliefs reveals a universal human impulse, the desire to connect with something greater than oneself. These acts, though extreme, are rooted in the conviction that sacrifice can transcend the boundaries of the physical, offering a path to eternal peace or divine favor. As we reflect on the Sokushinbatsu monks, it's impossible not to be struck by the depth of their commitment. Their story challenges us to consider the lengths to which individuals will go in pursuit of spiritual fulfillment, and how these acts, though often misunderstood, are profound expressions of faith. From the mountains of Japan to the temples of ancient civilizations, the theme of sacrifice as a bridge between the mortal and the divine continues to echo through the ages. Deep in the rainforests of Borneo, the Dayak people practiced a ritual that strikes a chilling chord in the modern imagination: head hunting. To outsiders, the act of taking an enemy's head as a trophy might seem barbaric, but for the Dayak, it was a deeply spiritual practice woven into the fabric of their culture and beliefs. This wasn't simply an act of violence, it was a sacred exchange, a way to honor the spirits, protect the community, and assert one's identity in a world where survival often depended on strength and courage. The Dayak believed that the human head contained semangat, or life force, a powerful spiritual energy that could be harnessed for the benefit of the community. By taking an enemy's head, a warrior wasn't just proving their prowess in battle, they were capturing this vital energy and bringing it back to their village. The heads were often displayed in longhouses, where they served as both trophies and protective talismans, warding off evil spirits and ensuring the prosperity of the community. In a sense, the act of headhunting was a form of spiritual warfare, a way to balance the scales of power between the human and supernatural realms. But headhunting wasn't just about the spiritual, it was also deeply social. For the Dayak, taking a head was a rite of passage, a way for young men to prove their bravery and earn respect within the community. It was a marker of adulthood, a symbol of one's ability to protect and provide for the group. The rituals surrounding headhunting were elaborate, involving feasts, dances, and ceremonies that celebrated the warrior's achievement and reinforced communal bonds. In this way, headhunting wasn't just an individual act, it was a collective experience, a way to strengthen the identity and cohesion of the entire village. Warfare, too, played a significant role in shaping this practice. The Dayak lived in a world of constant competition for resources, where alliances shifted and conflicts were frequent. Headhunting served as both a deterrent and a declaration of power, sending a clear message to rival groups: cross us, and you risk losing not just your life but your very essence. Yet, it's important to note that headhunting wasn't random or indiscriminate. It was governed by strict rules and rituals, ensuring that the act remained a sacred duty rather than a descent into chaos. As we reflect on the Dayak's headhunting rituals, it's impossible not to see the complexity of their worldview. This wasn't a practice born of cruelty, but of necessity and belief. It speaks to the lengths to which humans will go to protect their communities, honor their gods, and assert their place in the world. And while the practice has largely faded into history, its legacy endures, a reminder of the intricate ways in which spirituality, identity, and survival intersect. From the forests of Borneo, we now turn to a practice that, while vastly different in form, shares a similar communal spirit. In the highlands of ancient Peru, the Inca civilization carried out rituals that involved entire communities, binding them together in acts of devotion that were as much about collective identity as they were about individual sacrifice. These ceremonies, though distinct from the Dayak's headhunting, reveal yet another facet of humanity's enduring relationship with sacrifice, a relationship we'll explore as we continue our journey through the extraordinary martyrdoms of forgotten civilizations. High in the arid valleys of northern Peru, the Moche civilization thrived between the 1st and 8th centuries CE, leaving behind a legacy of stunning artistry and complex rituals. Among their most haunting practices were the mass sacrifices, often involving prisoners of war, which reveal a society deeply entwined with the forces of life and death. Unlike the solitary or symbolic sacrifices of other cultures, the Moche's ceremonies were grand communal events designed to awe, terrify, and unite their people under the authority of their rulers. But what drove this civilization to such extremes, and what can these acts tell us about the intersection of religion, politics, and power in the ancient world? Archaeological evidence provides a chilling window into these rituals. At sites like the Huaca de la Luna, a sprawling temple complex near modern-day Trujillo, murals depict scenes of sacrifice in vivid detail. Bound prisoners, their faces etched with pain and resignation, are shown being led to their deaths by priests adorned in elaborate regalia. The murals are not just artistic expressions, they are historical records capturing the scale and brutality of these ceremonies. Excavations have uncovered the remains of dozens, sometimes hundreds, of individuals, many with signs of violent death. Their bones tell a story of throats slit, hearts removed, and bodies left as offerings to the gods. These discoveries confirm what the murals suggest, that the Moche's sacrifices were not occasional or symbolic, but frequent and deeply ingrained in their culture. The victims of these rituals were often prisoners of war, captured in conflicts with neighboring tribes or rival factions. For the Moche, these captives were more than just enemies. They were sacred offerings, their lives believed to hold immense spiritual power. By sacrificing them, the Moche sought to appease their gods, particularly the deity known as Ai Apik, the decapitator, who was associated with warfare, fertility, and the cycles of nature. The act of sacrifice was not just about destruction, it was about renewal, a way to ensure the continued favor of the gods and the stability of their world. The blood of the victims was seen as a life-giving force, nourishing the earth and ensuring bountiful harvests, while their death symbolized the triumph of order over chaos. But these rituals were not solely acts of devotion. They were also deeply political. The Moch rulers, who often presided over the sacrifices, used these ceremonies to assert their authority and legitimacy. By orchestrating such grand displays of power, they demonstrated their ability to command life and death, reinforcing their role as intermediaries between the human and divine realms. The sacrifices were public spectacles designed to inspire awe and fear, uniting the community under the ruler's authority while deterring dissent or rebellion. In this way, the rituals served a dual purpose. They were both spiritual acts and tools of governance, a way to maintain control in a society where religion and politics were inextricably linked. What's perhaps most striking about the Moch's mass sacrifices is how they reflect the duality of their worldview. Life and death, violence and renewal were not opposites but interconnected forces, each feeding into the other. The sacrifices were not just about destruction. They were about transformation, about turning the chaos of war into the order of peace through an act of profound symbolism. For the Moch, these rituals were a way to navigate the uncertainties of their world, to find meaning in the face of adversity, and to ensure the survival of their people. As we reflect on the Moch's mass sacrifices, it's impossible not to see parallels in other civilizations, where the line between the sacred and the secular was often blurred. From the Aztecs to the Shang dynasty, the act of offering human lives was a recurring theme, a way for societies to assert their power, appease their gods, and confront the mysteries of existence. The Moch's rituals, though distant in time, remind us of the profound ways in which belief shapes behavior, and how the quest for meaning can lead to both creation and destruction. From the blood-soaked temples of the Moch, we now turn to a practice that, while less overtly violent, reveals another layer of humanity's complex relationship with sacrifice. In the windswept steppes of Central Asia, the Scythians carried out rituals that were no less profound in their symbolism and impact, offering a glimpse into a world where life, death, and the divine were inextricably linked. In the land of the rising sun, where cherry blossoms symbolize both the beauty and fragility of life, the samurai stood as paragons of discipline, loyalty, and honor. Yet their code of Bushido, the way of the warrior, demanded more than just bravery in battle. In moments of disgrace, failure, or the need to atone for a perceived wrongdoing, a samurai's ultimate act of honor was not to fight but to die. This practice, known as seppuku or harakiri, involved the ritual disembowelment of oneself, a gruesome yet profoundly symbolic act that defined the samurai's commitment to their values. Seppuku was far more than a means of escape from shame. It was a meticulously orchestrated ritual, steeped in tradition and spiritual significance. The act itself was performed with a short blade, often a tanto dagger, and required immense physical and mental fortitude. The samurai would plunge the blade into their abdomen, making a precise left-to-right cut, followed by an upward movement to ensure a fatal wound. The pain was excruciating, but the act was not about suffering. It was about demonstrating unwavering resolve and purity of spirit. In many cases, a trusted second, or kaishakunin, would stand by to deliver a swift decapitation, sparing the samurai prolonged agony. This final act was not a sign of weakness, but of respect, ensuring the ritual was completed with dignity. The roots of seppuku lie deep within Japanese culture and philosophy. At its core was the samurai's belief in jiri, or duty, which demanded absolute loyalty to one's lord, family, and code of honor. To fail in this duty was to lose not just one's reputation, but one's very identity. Seppuku, therefore, was seen as a way to reclaim honor, a final act of agency in the face of failure. It was also tied to the Buddhist concept of impermanence, which taught that the physical body was transient while the spirit endured. By willingly ending their lives, samurai demonstrated their detachment from the material world and their commitment to eternal principles. This practice also played a critical role in feudal Japanese society. It served as a means of maintaining order and discipline within the warrior class, reinforcing the hierarchy and the values that bound it together. For a samurai, the threat of seppuku was a constant reminder of the weight of their responsibilities, yet it was also a way to assert one's autonomy. In a society where honor was paramount, the ability to choose death on one's own terms was seen as the ultimate expression of free will. What's striking about seppuku is how it reveals the duality of the samurai ethos. On one hand, it was an act of profound self-sacrifice, a way to atone for failure and restore balance. On the other, it was an assertion of power, a defiant statement that even in death, the samurai remained in control. This paradox of submission and defiance, of destruction and renewal, captures the essence of the samurai spirit, a legacy that continues to resonate in modern Japanese culture. From the solemn rituals of the samurai, we now turn to a practice that, while less physically extreme, carries its own profound symbolism. In the ancient kingdom of Dahomey, sacrifices were not always about the loss of life, but about the offering of what was most precious to the community. These acts, though different in form, reveal yet another facet of humanity's enduring relationship with sacrifice, a relationship we'll explore as we continue our journey through the extraordinary martyrdoms of forgotten civilizations. In the lush, humid lowlands of ancient Mesoamerica, long before the rise of the Maya or Aztecs, the Olmec civilization laid the foundation for a tradition that would echo through the ages, the ritual of bloodletting. Known as the mother culture of Mesoamerica, the Olmecs were pioneers in art, architecture, and perhaps most strikingly, in the spiritual practices that shaped their world. Among these, the act of offering blood to the gods stands out as a profound expression of devotion, one that blurred the line between the physical and the divine, the ruler and the sacred. For the Olmecs, blood was far more than a biological substance. It was the essence of life itself, a conduit between the human and spiritual realms. Rulers, seen as intermediaries between their people and the gods, would perform bloodletting rituals as a way to nourish the divine and maintain the delicate balance of the cosmos. Using sharp obsidian blades or stingray spines, they would pierce their tongues, ears, or even genitals, allowing their blood to flow onto strips of bark paper or into ceremonial bowls. This blood, once offered, was burned, its smoke rising to the heavens as a sacred offering. The act was not one of mere suffering, it was a transformative experience, a way for the ruler to demonstrate their commitment to their people and their role as a bridge between worlds. The symbolism of bloodletting was deeply tied to the Olmec worldview. They believed that the gods required sustenance to keep the world in balance, and human blood, rich in life force, was the ultimate offering. By willingly shedding their own blood, rulers were not just performing a ritual, they were engaging in a sacred dialogue with the divine, ensuring the fertility of the land, the success of the harvest, and the stability of their realm. This practice also reinforced the idea of the ruler as a divine figure, someone whose body and blood were inherently sacred, capable of communing with the gods on behalf of their people. In this way, bloodletting was both a spiritual duty and a powerful assertion of political authority. Archaeological evidence offers a fascinating glimpse into these rituals. Carved stelae and figurines depict Olmec rulers holding bloodletting tools, their expressions serene, their postures regal. These images suggest that the act was performed with solemnity and precision, a carefully choreographed ceremony that underscored the ruler's role as both priest and king. The tools themselves, often intricately carved and adorned with symbols of power, were not mere instruments, they were sacred objects imbued with spiritual significance. Each cut, each drop of blood was a deliberate act of devotion, a way to reaffirm the ruler's connection to the divine and their responsibility to their people. But the political implications of bloodletting cannot be overlooked. In a society where power was often concentrated in the hands of a few, these rituals served as a way to legitimize authority and maintain social order. By performing bloodletting, rulers demonstrated their willingness to endure pain for the greater good, reinforcing their position as protectors and providers. The public nature of these ceremonies also played a crucial role in uniting the community, reminding everyone of the ruler's divine mandate and the collective dependence on the god's favor. It was a powerful display of control, both spiritual and temporal, that helped cement the ruler's status as the linchpin of Olmec society. What's perhaps most striking about the Olmec bloodletting rituals is how they reveal the interconnectedness of religion and politics in ancient civilizations. These acts were not just about appeasing the gods, they were about maintaining the social fabric, ensuring that the community remained cohesive and the ruler's authority unchallenged. The Olmecs understood that power, whether divine or earthly, required constant reaffirmation, and bloodletting was one of the most potent ways to achieve this. Their legacy, though often overshadowed by later Mesoamerican cultures, laid the groundwork for practices that would endure for centuries, shaping the spiritual and political landscapes of the region. From the blood offerings of the Olmecs, we now turn to a practice that, while rooted in a different time and place, reveals a similar interplay between sacrifice and power. Across the globe, in the ancient kingdom of Dahomey, rituals of devotion took on a different form, one that emphasized the symbolic over the physical, yet carried no less weight in its significance. These acts, though distinct from the Olmec's bloodletting, remind us of the profound ways in which sacrifice has been used to bridge the human and the divine, a theme we'll continue to explore as we unravel the stories of extraordinary martyrdoms and sacrificial rites. In the misty, rain-soaked landscapes of ancient Europe, the Celts carried out rituals that were as enigmatic as they were profound. Among these, the practice of offering sacrifices to the gods stands out, a tradition that often unfolded in the eerie, otherworldly settings of bogs and sacred groves. These sites, steeped in spiritual significance, were seen as liminal spaces, places where the boundaries between the human and divine realms blurred. Here, the Celts would offer animals and at times humans to their gods in acts of devotion that were both ceremonial and deeply symbolic. The choice of bogs as sacrificial sites was far from arbitrary. These waterlogged, marshy areas were seen as gateways to the otherworld, a realm inhabited by gods, spirits, and ancestors. By offering sacrifices in these places, the Celts believed they could communicate directly with the divine, ensuring the gods' favor and the prosperity of their communities. The offerings themselves varied, from prized livestock to weapons and even human captives. The most striking examples are the so-called bog bodies, remarkably preserved remains of individuals who were ritually killed and deposited in these watery graves. These bodies, often bearing signs of violent death, strangulation, throat cutting, or blunt force trauma, offer a haunting glimpse into the Celt sacrificial practices. But these acts were not merely expressions of violence. They were deeply rooted in the Celt's spiritual worldview, where life and death were seen as part of a continuous cycle. To offer a life, whether animal or human, was to give something of immense value, a gesture of reciprocity that affirmed the bond between the community and the gods. These sacrifices were often tied to key moments in the agricultural calendar, such as the planting or harvest seasons, or to times of crisis such as famine or war. By offering the gods what they valued most, life itself, the Celts sought to maintain the balance of their world and ensure its continued prosperity. The communal aspect of these rituals cannot be overlooked. Sacrifices were not private acts but public events involving the entire community. They were moments of collective prayer and celebration where the boundaries between the sacred and the secular dissolved. The act of sacrifice reinforced social cohesion, reminding everyone of their shared dependence on the gods and the importance of their roles within the community. For the Celts, these rituals were not just about appeasing the gods. They were about reaffirming their identity as a people bound together by common beliefs and practices. As we reflect on the Celts' sacrificial rites, it's impossible not to see the echoes of these practices in other cultures. From the Mayas' bloodletting to the Aztecs' grand ceremonies, the idea of offering life to the divine is a recurring theme in human history. But what sets the Celts apart is the intimate, almost primal connection they felt to the land and its spirits. Their sacrifices were not grand spectacles but deeply personal acts, performed in the quiet, sacred spaces of bogs and groves, places where the veil between worlds was at its thinnest. From these earthy, waterlogged sanctuaries, we now turn to a practice that, while equally rooted in spiritual devotion, takes a far more extreme form. In the highlands of ancient Tibet, Buddhist monks embraced a path of self-sacrifice that demanded not just the offering of life, but the ultimate act of renunciation, a journey we'll explore as we continue our examination of extraordinary martyrdoms and sacrificial rites. High in the cloud-kissed mountains of northern Peru, the Chachapoya civilization thrived in a landscape shrouded in mist and mystery. Known as the Warriors of the Clouds, they left behind a legacy of breathtaking architecture and enigmatic rituals. Among their most haunting practices was the ritual drowning of sacrificial victims in sacred lakes, a practice that speaks to their deep connection with water, the cycles of nature, and the spiritual forces they believed governed their world. The Chachapoya viewed their sacred lakes as portals to the divine, places where the boundaries between the earthly and spiritual realms blurred. These bodies of water were not just physical landmarks, they were living entities imbued with immense spiritual power. To offer a life to these waters was to engage in a sacred exchange, a way to ensure the gods' continued favor and the fertility of the land. The victims, often young and healthy individuals, were chosen for their purity and vitality, seen as worthy vessels to carry the community's prayers to the gods. The act of drowning, while horrifying to modern sensibilities, was not seen as an end but as a transformation, a passage to a higher state of being. The symbolism of water in these rituals cannot be overstated. For the Chachapoya, water was the lifeblood of their world, essential for agriculture, survival, and spiritual renewal. By offering a life to the lakes, they believed they were nurturing the very source of their existence, ensuring that the rains would come, the crops would grow, and the community would thrive. This connection between sacrifice and environmental cycles was central to their worldview. The timing of these rituals often coincided with key moments in the agricultural calendar, such as the onset of the rainy season or the planting of crops. In this way, the sacrifices were not just acts of devotion but practical measures to secure the community's survival. Archaeological discoveries have shed light on these practices, revealing the careful preparation and reverence that accompanied them. Human remains found in high-altitude lakes and ceremonial sites show signs of ritualistic treatment, with some victims adorned in fine garments or placed in positions of honor. These findings suggest that the act of drowning was not a hasty or brutal one but a deliberate ceremonial process, carried out with solemnity and respect. For the Chachapoya, these sacrifices were not about death but about renewal, a way to maintain the delicate balance between the human and divine, the physical and spiritual. What's perhaps most striking about the Chachapoya's rituals is how they reflect the interconnectedness of life, death, and the natural world. For them, the act of drowning a victim was not an isolated event but part of a larger cycle, one that mirrored the rhythms of the environment. The rising and falling of water levels, the changing of the seasons, and the growth and decay of crops were all seen as part of a cosmic dance, one that required constant effort to maintain. By offering a life to the lakes, the Chachapoya were not just appeasing the gods. They were participating in this dance, ensuring that the cycle of life continued unbroken. As we reflect on the Chachapoya's ritual drownings, it's impossible not to see the profound ways in which their practices were shaped by their environment. These acts were not just about faith, they were about survival, a way to navigate the uncertainties of their world and find meaning in the face of adversity. And as we turn our attention to another civilization, one that also found itself deeply entwined with the forces of nature, we'll see how these themes of sacrifice and renewal continue to echo through the ages. In the arid deserts of the American Southwest, the ancestral Pueblones built their lives around the rhythms of the land, creating a culture that was as resilient as it was spiritual. Their practices, though vastly different from those of the Chachapoya, reveal a similar reverence for the natural world and the cycles that sustained it, a connection we'll explore as we continue our journey through the extraordinary martyrdoms of forgotten civilizations. In the shadowy corners of colonial India, a cult emerged whose practices struck terror into the hearts of travelers and colonial officials alike. Known as the Thuggees, this secretive group carried out a form of sacrifice that was as chilling as it was ritualistic. Their method, strangulation, a swift, silent act of violence performed not out of malice, but as an offering to the Hindu goddess Kali. For the Thuggees, this was not mere murder, it was a sacred duty, a way to honor the goddess of destruction and renewal. But what drove these individuals to such extremes, and how did their practices reflect the religious and cultural complexities of their time? The Thuggees believed that Kali, a fearsome deity often depicted with a garland of skulls and a blood-stained tongue, demanded human lives as offerings. They saw themselves as her chosen agents, tasked with carrying out her will by eliminating those she deemed unworthy. Victims, often unsuspecting travelers, were lured into the cult's confidence before being strangled with a ceremonial cloth known as a rumel. The act was performed with precision and ritual, accompanied by prayers and invocations to Kali. For the Thuggees, this was not an act of cruelty but one of devotion, a way to maintain the cosmic balance and ensure the goddess's favor. The cultural context of the Thuggee cult is crucial to understanding their practices. In Hinduism, Kali represents the destructive aspect of the divine feminine, a force that annihilates evil and clears the way for new creation. Her worship often involves rituals that challenge conventional morality, reflecting the belief that destruction is a necessary precursor to rebirth. The Thuggees took this belief to its most extreme conclusion, interpreting their actions as a form of divine service. Yet their practices were not universally accepted, even within Hindu society. Many viewed them as heretical, a perversion of Kali's teachings rather than an expression of them. This tension highlights the diversity of interpretations within Hinduism and the ways in which religious beliefs can be shaped and sometimes distorted by individual or group agendas. The Thuggees' reign of terror came to an end in the 19th century when British colonial authorities launched a brutal campaign to suppress the cult. Led by figures like William Sleeman, the British employed a combination of intelligence, coercion, and force to dismantle the Thuggee network. Thousands were arrested, tried, and executed, while others were imprisoned or exiled. The campaign was driven not just by a desire to protect travelers, but also by the British need to assert control over their colonial subjects. By portraying the Thuggees as savages in need of civilization, the British justified their own oppressive rule, using the cult's existence as evidence of Indian barbarism. This narrative, while effective in rallying support for the suppression, oversimplified the complex religious and social factors that gave rise to the Thuggees, reducing them to mere villains in a colonial morality tale. As we reflect on the Thuggees and their practices, it's impossible not to see the duality of their legacy. On one hand, they were perpetrators of horrifying violence, their actions leaving a trail of death and suffering. On the other, they were products of their time and beliefs, individuals who saw themselves as serving a higher purpose. Their story challenges us to consider the ways in which religion can be both a source of profound meaning and a justification for extreme acts. It also reminds us of the dangers of oversimplifying history, of reducing complex cultural phenomena to black and white narratives. From the shadowy world of the Thuggees, we now turn to a practice that, while equally rooted in devotion, takes a far more symbolic form. In the ancient kingdom of Dahomey, sacrifices were not always about the loss of life, but about the offering of what was most precious to the community. These acts, though different in form, reveal yet another facet of humanity's enduring relationship with sacrifice, a relationship we'll explore as we continue our journey through the extraordinary martyrdoms of forgotten civilizations. In the dense rainforests of the Amazon, the Wari people practiced a ritual that, at first glance, might seem unimaginable, eating the flesh of their dead. To outsiders, this act of endocannibalism appears shocking, even grotesque, but for the Wari, it was a profound expression of love, respect, and community. Far from being a macabre or violent act, this practice was deeply rooted in their spiritual beliefs and served as a way to honor the deceased while strengthening the bonds among the living. At the heart of this ritual was the Wari belief that the body was more than just a physical vessel. It was a sacred connection to the person's spirit. When a loved one passed away, their body was not seen as something to discard, but as a final gift to the community. By consuming the flesh, the Wari believed they were preserving the essence of the deceased, allowing their spirit to live on within the bodies of their kin. This act wasn't about destruction, it was about transformation, a way to ensure that the departed remained a part of the community, even in death. The process itself was carried out with great care and reverence. The body was prepared by roasting, and the flesh was shared among family members and close friends. This act of sharing was deeply symbolic, reinforcing the idea that even in grief, the community remained united. The emotional and spiritual significance of this practice cannot be overstated. For the Wari, mourning was not just an individual experience, but a collective one. By consuming the flesh of the deceased, they transformed their grief into a tangible act of connection, ensuring that no one was left to mourn alone. This ritual also served as a way to confront the reality of death, helping the community come to terms with loss and find closure. In a world where life was often precarious, these practices provided a sense of continuity and resilience, reminding the Wari that even in the face of death, life and community endured. But the ritual wasn't just about the spiritual or emotional, it also played a crucial role in maintaining social cohesion. In Wari society, relationships were built on reciprocity and mutual care. Sharing the flesh of the dead was an extension of this principle, a way to reaffirm the bonds that held the community together. It was a reminder that everyone had a role to play, not just in life but in death as well. By participating in the ritual, individuals demonstrated their commitment to the group, reinforcing the idea that the community was greater than the sum of its parts. This sense of unity was essential in a society where survival often depended on cooperation and trust. What's perhaps most striking about the Wari practice is how it challenges our modern assumptions about death and mourning. In many cultures today, death is often seen as something to be hidden away, a private and often sanitized experience. For the Wari, it was the opposite. Death was a communal event, something to be confronted openly and collectively. Their rituals remind us that grief doesn't have to be isolating. It can be a shared journey, a way to find meaning and connection even in the face of loss. As we shift our focus from the weary rainforests to the sweeping plains of Central Asia, we encounter another civilization that found meaning in the act of sacrifice, not through consumption but through the offering of horses. These rituals, though vastly different in form, reveal a similar thread: the belief that sacrifice, whether personal or communal, is a way to bridge the gap between the human and the divine, the living and the dead. And as we explore these practices, we'll see how the themes of connection, transformation, and renewal continue to shape the stories of those who came before us. In the golden sands of ancient Egypt, where the Nile's life-giving waters nourished a civilization of unparalleled grandeur, the gods were ever present, shaping every aspect of life and death. To maintain the delicate balance of Maat, the cosmic order that held the universe together, the Egyptians engaged in rituals of sacrifice, offering animals and, at times, humans to their deities. These ceremonies were not mere acts of appeasement. They were profound expressions of devotion, designed to ensure the gods' favor and the stability of the world itself. But what did these sacrifices truly mean, and how did they reflect the Egyptians' understanding of their place in the cosmos? At the heart of Egyptian sacrificial rites was the belief that the gods required sustenance to continue their divine work. Just as the Nile's floods nourished the fields, the offerings of food, drink, and life itself nourished the gods. Animals, particularly cattle, goats, and birds, were the most common sacrifices, their blood and flesh seen as a sacred exchange between the human and divine realms. These offerings were often accompanied by elaborate ceremonies, with priests chanting hymns, burning incense, and performing rituals to purify the space and the participants. The act of sacrifice was not just about giving, it was about creating a connection, a way for the mortal and immortal to commune. But the Egyptians also practiced human sacrifice, though far less frequently and often in specific contexts. One of the most striking examples is the practice of retainer sacrifice, where servants, guards, or other attendants were buried alive with a deceased pharaoh or noble. This grim tradition was rooted in the belief that the deceased would need their retinue in the afterlife to serve and protect them. While this practice declined over time, replaced by symbolic figurines known as ushabtis, it highlights the Egyptians' conviction that life and death were interconnected, and that sacrifices in this world could have profound implications for the next. The symbolism of these acts cannot be overstated. For the Egyptians, sacrifice was not just about the physical offering, it was about the spiritual intent behind it. The blood of a sacrificed animal, for example, was seen as a powerful life force, capable of renewing the god's strength and ensuring their continued protection. Similarly, the act of offering a human life was not about destruction but transformation, a way to elevate the individual to a higher status, ensuring their eternal service to the divine. These rituals reinforced the idea that the gods were not distant or indifferent, but active participants in the world, requiring constant care and devotion from their human counterparts. The political and social dimensions of these practices were equally significant. Sacrificial rites were often tied to the authority of the pharaoh, who was seen as the intermediary between the gods and the people. By presiding over these ceremonies, the pharaoh demonstrated his divine mandate, reinforcing his role as the keeper of Maat and the protector of the kingdom. These rituals also served to unite the community, reminding everyone of their shared dependence on the gods and the importance of their collective efforts to maintain cosmic harmony. In this way, sacrifice was not just a religious act, it was a tool of governance, a way to assert authority and foster cohesion. As we reflect on the sacrificial rites of ancient Egypt, it's impossible not to marvel at the complexity of their beliefs and the depth of their devotion. These acts, though often stark and unsettling, reveal a civilization deeply attuned to the rhythms of the natural and spiritual worlds. They remind us that for the Egyptians, life was not just about survival. It was about maintaining a delicate balance, one that required constant effort and sacrifice. And as we turn our attention to a more extreme form of devotion, one that demanded not just the offering of life, but the ultimate act of self-sacrifice, we'll see how these themes of transformation and renewal continue to shape the stories of those who came before us. From the sun-drenched temples of Egypt, we now journey to the icy peaks of the Himalayas, where Buddhist monks embraced a path of self-sacrifice that pushed the boundaries of human endurance. Their practices, though vastly different in form, reveal a similar thread: the belief that the ultimate offering of oneself could bridge the gap between the mortal and the divine, the earthly and the eternal, a connection we'll explore as we continue our examination of extraordinary martyrdoms and sacrificial rites. High in the misty mountains of Vietnam during the turbulent years of the 1960s, a series of extraordinary acts of protest captured the world's attention. Buddhist nuns, clad in simple robes, sat in quiet meditation before setting themselves ablaze in public squares. This act of self-immolation, voluntarily burning oneself to death, was not an expression of despair but a profound statement of spiritual devotion and political resistance. To those unfamiliar with the cultural and philosophical backdrop, it might seem incomprehensible. But for these nuns, it was the ultimate act of sacrifice, a way to awaken the world to the injustices they faced and to embody the Buddhist ideal of compassion, even in the face of immense suffering. At the heart of this practice lies the Buddhist concept of bodhicitta, the aspiration to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. For these nuns, self-immolation was not merely a personal act but a deeply altruistic one. They believed that by offering their lives, they could draw attention to the oppression of their people and inspire change. This was not a decision made lightly. It required immense courage, spiritual preparation, and a profound understanding of the impermanence of the physical body. In Buddhist philosophy, the body is seen as a temporary vessel, while the mind and spirit are eternal. By willingly sacrificing their physical form, these nuns sought to transcend the limitations of the material world and make a statement that would resonate far beyond their immediate circumstances. The historical context of these acts is crucial to understanding their significance. In Vietnam, the 1960s were marked by political instability, religious persecution, and the growing influence of foreign powers. The Buddhist community, which had long been a pillar of Vietnamese society, found itself increasingly marginalized. Temples were raided, monks and nuns were arrested, and religious practices were suppressed. For many, self-immolation became a way to protest these injustices, a form of non-violent resistance that carried immense symbolic weight. The images of these nuns, calmly sitting in flames, became powerful symbols of resilience and defiance, capturing the attention of both national and international audiences. But the act of self-immolation is not just a historical footnote. It continues to resonate in modern times. In Tibet, for example, self-immolation has been used as a form of protest against Chinese rule, with individuals setting themselves on fire to draw attention to the suppression of Tibetan culture and religion. These acts, like those of the Vietnamese nuns, are rooted in the belief that sacrifice can serve as a catalyst for change, a way to awaken the conscience of the world and demand justice. They highlight the intersection of spirituality and activism, showing how martyrdom can be both a deeply personal and profoundly political act. What's striking about these acts is how they challenge our understanding of sacrifice. In many cultures, martyrdom is associated with violence or combat, but in the Buddhist tradition, it is often an act of peace and compassion. The nuns who immolated themselves were not seeking revenge or destruction. They were offering their lives as a plea for understanding and reconciliation. Their actions remind us that sacrifice, in its highest form, is not about destruction but about transformation both of the individual and of the society they seek to change. As we reflect on the self-immolation of Buddhist nuns, it's impossible not to see the parallels with other forms of martyrdom throughout history. From the early Christian martyrs who willingly faced death to uphold their faith, to the political dissidents who sacrificed their lives for freedom, these acts reveal a universal human impulse, the desire to stand for something greater than oneself, even at the greatest cost. And while the methods may differ, the underlying message remains the same: that sacrifice, when rooted in love and conviction, has the power to inspire, to heal, and to transform. From the quiet courage of Buddhist nuns, we now turn to a practice that, while vastly different in form, shares a similar thread of devotion and defiance. In the ancient kingdom of Dahomey, rituals of sacrifice were not just about appeasing the gods, but about asserting identity and resisting oppression, a theme we'll explore as we continue our journey through the extraordinary martyrdoms of forgotten civilizations. In the sun-drenched temples and sacred groves of ancient Greece, where gods and mortals were believed to share an intimate connection, sacrifice was more than a ritual, it was a lifeline to the divine. The Greeks, known for their rich mythology and philosophical thought, saw sacrifice as a necessary act of communion, a way to bridge the gap between the human and the divine. Whether it was the offering of a prized ox or, in rare instances, a human life, these ceremonies were steeped in symbolism and purpose, reflecting the Greeks' deep-seated belief in the delicate balance of the cosmos. At the heart of Greek sacrificial practices was the concept of do ut des, I give so that you may give. This reciprocal relationship between mortals and gods was foundational to their worldview. By offering the gods something of value, be it an animal, a libation of wine, or even a human, the Greeks believed they could secure divine favor, ensuring prosperity, victory in battle, or a bountiful harvest. The act of sacrifice was not merely transactional, it was deeply symbolic, a way to acknowledge the gods' power and affirm humanity's place within the larger order of the universe. The rituals themselves were elaborate affairs, often accompanied by music, prayers, and feasting, transforming the act of offering into a communal celebration. Animals were the most common sacrificial offerings, with cattle, sheep, and goats frequently chosen for their symbolic significance. The choice of animal often reflected the nature of the deity being honored. For example, a black ram might be sacrificed to Hades, god of the underworld, while a white bull could be offered to Zeus, king of the gods. The animal's blood, seen as the essence of life, was particularly important. It was often collected in a ceremonial vessel and poured over an altar, its flow symbolizing the transfer of life force from the mortal realm to the divine. The meat, meanwhile, was typically shared among the participants, reinforcing the communal aspect of the ritual and the idea that the gods' blessings were for all to enjoy. But human sacrifice, though far rarer, also played a role in Greek religious practice. One of the most famous examples is the myth of Iphigenia, the daughter of Agamemnon, who is said to have been offered to Artemis to ensure favorable winds for the Greek fleet sailing to Troy. While the historical accuracy of such tales is debated, they reflect the Greeks' belief in the power of human life as an offering. In some cases, particularly during times of crisis, individuals, often prisoners of war or slaves, were sacrificed to appease the gods and restore cosmic balance. These acts, though shocking to modern sensibilities, were seen as necessary measures to protect the community and maintain harmony with the divine. The symbolic meaning of these sacrifices extended beyond the immediate act. For the Greeks, the ritual of offering life, whether animal or human, was a way to confront the fragility of existence and the inevitability of death. It was a reminder that life and death were part of a continuous cycle, each feeding into the other. By participating in these ceremonies, the Greeks sought to align themselves with the rhythms of the natural and spiritual worlds, ensuring their survival and prosperity in a universe governed by forces far beyond their control. As we move from the communal sacrifices of the Greeks to a more solitary and extreme form of devotion, we encounter a practice that pushes the boundaries of human endurance and faith. In the mountains of ancient Tibet, Buddhist monks embraced a path of self-sacrifice that demanded not just the offering of life, but the ultimate act of renunciation, a journey that reveals the profound depths of spiritual commitment and the lengths to which humans will go in their quest for enlightenment. In the final, desperate years of World War II, as the tide of battle turned against Japan, a new and harrowing form of warfare emerged, one that would forever alter the way the world viewed sacrifice. The kamikaze, or divine wind, pilots became symbols of both unyielding loyalty and the tragic cost of war. These young men, often barely out of their teens, volunteered to crash their aircraft into enemy ships, giving their lives in a single, explosive act of devotion to their nation. To many, this practice seemed unthinkable, even irrational, but for the kamikaze pilots, it was the ultimate expression of duty, honor, and a deeply ingrained cultural belief in the sanctity of sacrifice. The origins of the kamikaze tradition lie in Japan's long history of valuing honor over life itself. Rooted in the samurai code of Bushido, which emphasized loyalty, courage, and self-sacrifice, the kamikaze pilots saw their actions as a continuation of this ancient ethos. For them, dying for one's country was not a tragedy but a privilege, a way to achieve eternal glory and ensure their place among the revered ancestors. This cultural framework was further reinforced by the wartime propaganda of the time, which portrayed the kamikaze as heroes embodying the spirit of Japan itself. They were not just soldiers, they were symbols of national identity, their deaths a testament to the strength and resilience of their people. But the kamikaze phenomenon was not merely a product of cultural tradition. It was also a strategic response to the dire circumstances Japan faced. By 1944, the Japanese military was struggling against overwhelming Allied forces. Resources were dwindling and conventional tactics were failing. The kamikaze attacks, while devastatingly effective in the short term, were born out of necessity, a last-ditch effort to turn the tide of war by inflicting maximum damage with minimal resources. Yet, behind the strategy was a deeply human story. Many of these pilots were not hardened warriors but young men, some as young as 17, who had been thrust into an impossible situation. Letters left behind by kamikaze pilots reveal a mix of emotions: patriotic fervor, fear, and even a quiet resignation to their fate. They were not faceless martyrs but individuals, each with their own dreams and regrets, who chose to give everything for a cause they believed in. The legacy of the kamikaze is complex and often contentious. In the aftermath of the war, their actions were viewed through a lens of both admiration and criticism. Some saw them as heroic defenders of their homeland, while others questioned the morality of a system that demanded such sacrifices from its youth. Today, the kamikaze pilots are remembered not just for their bravery but also for the ethical dilemmas they embody. Their story forces us to confront difficult questions about the nature of duty, the cost of war, and the ways in which societies mobilize individuals for collective causes. Beyond their historical significance, the kamikaze pilots also highlight the broader theme of martyrdom as a form of political resistance. Throughout history, individuals and groups have turned to self-sacrifice as a way to challenge oppression, assert identity, or inspire change. From the self-immolation of Buddhist monks in Vietnam to the hunger strikes of political prisoners, these acts are often born out of a sense of powerlessness, a belief that one's life, when offered willingly, can become a powerful tool for transformation. The kamikaze pilots, though operating within a very different context, share this thread of sacrifice as resistance. Their actions were not just about military strategy, they were a statement of defiance, a refusal to surrender even in the face of certain defeat. As we reflect on the kamikaze pilots, we're reminded that martyrdom is rarely simple. It's a deeply human act shaped by culture, circumstance, and conviction. Whether viewed as heroes or victims, these young men challenge us to consider the ways in which sacrifice can be both a personal and political act, one that resonates far beyond the moment of its occurrence. Their story, like so many others in history, reveals the profound and often heartbreaking lengths to which individuals will go in the name of something greater than themselves. From the skies above the Pacific, we now turn to a different theater of sacrifice, one that unfolds not in the heat of battle, but in the quiet, introspective spaces of spiritual devotion. In the temples and monasteries of ancient Tibet, Buddhist monks embraced a path of self-sacrifice that demanded not just the offering of life, but the ultimate act of renunciation, a journey that reveals the profound depths of spiritual commitment and the lengths to which humans will go in their quest for enlightenment. In the heart of ancient Rome, where the grandeur of the Colosseum and the Pantheon stood as testaments to a civilization's might, there existed a practice that was both sacred and startling: the ritual sacrifice. For the Romans, these acts were not mere displays of piety but essential ceremonies designed to maintain the delicate balance of the cosmos. Whether it was the blood of a bull offered to Jupiter or the life of a human prisoner given to Mars, these sacrifices were seen as necessary acts of devotion, ensuring the gods' favor and the stability of the empire itself. The Romans believed that their world was governed by Pax Deorum, or the peace of the gods. This concept held that the gods actively influenced the fate of Rome, and it was the duty of mortals to keep them appeased. Sacrifices were the primary means of achieving this harmony. Animals, particularly bulls, sheep, and goats, were the most common offerings, their selection often tied to the deity being honored. A white bull, for instance, might be sacrificed to Jupiter, the king of the gods, while a ram could be offered to Mars, the god of war. The rituals themselves were highly structured, with priests meticulously following prescribed steps to ensure the god's acceptance. The animal's blood, considered the life force, was poured over an altar, its smoke rising to the heavens as a symbol of the connection between the earthly and divine realms. But the Romans' sacrificial practices were not limited to animals. In times of great crisis, natural disasters, military defeats, or political upheaval, human sacrifices were also performed. One of the most infamous examples is the devotio, a ritual in which a Roman general would offer his own life or the lives of his enemies to the gods in exchange for victory in battle. This act, while rare, underscores the Romans' belief in the power of human life as an offering. The devotio was not just a desperate plea for divine intervention. It was a calculated act of devotion, a way to demonstrate unwavering commitment to the gods and the empire they protected. The symbolic meaning of these sacrifices extended far beyond the immediate act. For the Romans, the ritual of offering life, whether animal or human, was a way to confront the fragility of existence and the inevitability of death. It was a reminder that life and death were part of a continuous cycle, each feeding into the other. By participating in these ceremonies, the Romans sought to align themselves with the rhythms of the natural and spiritual worlds, ensuring their survival and prosperity in a universe governed by forces far beyond their control. The political and social dimensions of these practices were equally significant. Sacrificial rites were often tied to the authority of the Roman state, with the emperor or high-ranking officials presiding over the ceremonies. These public spectacles served to reinforce the social hierarchy, reminding citizens of their shared dependence on the gods and the importance of their collective efforts to maintain cosmic harmony. In this way, sacrifice was not just a religious act, It was a tool of governance, a way to assert authority and foster cohesion in a vast and diverse empire. As we reflect on the sacrificial rites of ancient Rome, it's impossible not to marvel at the complexity of their beliefs and the depth of their devotion. These acts, though often stark and unsettling, reveal a civilization deeply attuned to the rhythms of the natural and spiritual worlds. They remind us that for the Romans, life was not just about survival. It was about maintaining a delicate balance, one that required constant effort and sacrifice. From the grandeur of Roman temples, we now turn to a practice that, while rooted in a different time and place, reveals a similar interplay between sacrifice and power. In the icy peaks of the Himalayas, Buddhist monks embraced a path of self-sacrifice that demanded not just the offering of life, but the ultimate act of renunciation, a journey that pushes the boundaries of human endurance and faith. Here, the line between the mortal and the divine blurs as individuals willingly give everything in pursuit of spiritual liberation. In the vibrant tapestry of Sikh history, where faith and courage intertwine, the concept of martyrdom holds a place of profound significance. For the Sikhs, martyrdom or shahidi is not merely an act of sacrifice, it is the ultimate expression of devotion, a testament to unwavering faith and the pursuit of justice. Rooted in the teachings of the Sikh gurus, this practice embodies the belief that standing up for one's beliefs, even at the cost of one's life, is the highest form of spiritual duty. But what does it truly mean to be a Sikh martyr, and how has this deeply ingrained principle shaped the identity and resilience of the Sikh community? At the heart of Sikh martyrdom lies the principle of Chardi Kala, a spirit of eternal optimism and resilience even in the face of adversity. The Sikh gurus, beginning with Guru Nanak in the 15th century, emphasized the importance of living a life of truth, justice, and compassion. For them, martyrdom was not about seeking death but about upholding these values, even when it meant facing persecution or death. The fifth Guru, Guru Arjan Dev, is often regarded as the first Sikh martyr. His execution in 1606, ordered by the Mughal Emperor Jahangir, was a turning point in Sikh history. Guru Arjan's refusal to renounce his faith or compromise his principles, even under torture, set a powerful precedent. His sacrifice was not an end but a beginning, a spark that ignited a legacy of courage and defiance. This legacy was further solidified by the martyrdom of the ninth Guru, Guru Tegh Bahadur, who gave his life to protect the religious freedoms of others. In 1675, he was executed by the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb for refusing to convert to Islam, a stand he took not just for Sikhs but for Hindus as well. His famous declaration, "The head may fall, but the faith will not," became a rallying cry for Sikhs and a reminder that martyrdom is not about death but about the triumph of truth over tyranny. These acts of sacrifice were not isolated events. They were part of a broader philosophy that valued selflessness, justice, and the protection of the oppressed. The cultural and philosophical underpinnings of Sikh martyrdom are deeply tied to the concept of seva, or selfless service. Sikhs are taught to live a life of service to others, to stand against injustice, and to protect the weak. Martyrdom in this context is seen as the ultimate act of seva, a way to give everything for the greater good. It is also connected to the belief in mukti, or liberation, where the soul is freed from the cycle of birth and death through righteous living and selfless acts. For Sikhs, martyrdom is not a tragedy but a path to spiritual fulfillment, a way to merge the individual soul with the divine. In modern history, the spirit of Sikh martyrdom has continued to resonate, particularly during times of political and social upheaval. The 20th century saw Sikhs making profound sacrifices in the struggle for India's independence, with figures like Bhagat Singh becoming symbols of resistance against colonial rule. More recently, the events of 1984, when the Indian government launched Operation Blue Star to remove Sikh militants from the Golden Temple, and the subsequent anti-Sikh riots, reignited discussions about martyrdom and the cost of standing up for one's beliefs. These events, while deeply painful, reinforced the Sikh community's commitment to their values and their resilience in the face of adversity. What sets Sikh martyrdom apart is its dual focus on spiritual and social justice. It is not just about personal salvation, but about the collective good. Sikh martyrs are remembered not only for their courage, but for their commitment to protecting the rights and dignity of all people, regardless of faith or background. This universal aspect of Sikh martyrdom challenges us to think beyond narrow definitions of sacrifice and to see it as a call to action, a reminder that true devotion is not passive but active, not inward but outward. From the quiet resolve of Guru Arjan to the defiant courage of Bhagat Singh, the legacy of Sikh martyrdom is a testament to the enduring power of faith and principle. It reminds us that sacrifice, when rooted in love and justice, can transcend time and place, becoming a beacon of hope and inspiration for generations to come. As we reflect on the profound sacrifices of the Sikh martyrs, we are reminded that martyrdom, in its many forms, is often tied to religious devotion. Across cultures and centuries, individuals have given their lives not out of despair but out of a deep belief in something greater than themselves. This theme, as we'll see, continues to echo in the stories of those who came before us, revealing the timeless and universal nature of sacrifice as a bridge between the human and the divine. In the sprawling empire of ancient Persia, where the sun blazed over vast deserts and towering mountains, the gods were never far from the minds of its people. The Persians, known for their grandeur and intricate religious practices, believed that the cosmos was a delicate balance of forces that required constant tending through acts of devotion. Among these acts, ritual sacrifices held a central place, serving as a bridge between the human and divine realms. Whether it was the blood of a prized bull or, in rare instances, a human life, these offerings were not merely acts of piety. They were profound expressions of a society's commitment to maintaining cosmic harmony. The Persian practice of sacrifice was deeply rooted in their Zoroastrian beliefs, which emphasized the eternal struggle between Ahura Mazda, the god of light and order, and Angra Mainyu, the spirit of darkness and chaos. To keep the forces of light triumphant, the Persians believed they had to actively participate in this cosmic battle, and sacrifices were one of their most powerful tools. Animals, particularly bulls, sheep, and goats, were the most common offerings, their blood seen as a life-giving force capable of nourishing the gods and renewing the world. These rituals were performed with meticulous care, often accompanied by prayers, chants, and the burning of sacred fires, which were believed to carry the offerings to the heavens. But the Persians also practiced human sacrifice, though these instances were far rarer and typically reserved for moments of extreme crisis or divine demand. Historical accounts describe elaborate ceremonies where prisoners of war or condemned individuals were offered to the gods, their deaths seen as a way to restore balance and ensure the empire's survival. These sacrifices were not acts of cruelty but of necessity, a way to appease the gods and protect the community from disaster. The symbolic meaning of these acts was profound. By offering a human life, the Persians believed they were giving the ultimate gift, one that could secure divine favor and maintain the fragile order of the universe. The rituals themselves were as much about the community as they were about the gods. Sacrifices were public events, often held in grand temples or open spaces, where the entire community could witness and participate in the act of devotion. These ceremonies reinforced social cohesion, reminding everyone of their shared dependence on the gods and the importance of their collective efforts to maintain harmony. For the Persians, sacrifice was not just a religious act, It was a way to unite the community, assert authority, and reaffirm their place within the cosmic order. What's striking about the Persian practice of sacrifice is how it reflects their broader worldview. For them, life and death were not opposites but interconnected parts of a greater whole. The act of offering life, whether animal or human, was a way to confront the fragility of existence and the inevitability of death. It was a reminder that the balance of the cosmos required constant effort, and that the gods were not distant or indifferent but active participants in the world, requiring constant care and devotion. As we move from the grand ceremonies of ancient Persia, we encounter a practice that takes the concept of sacrifice to an even more personal and extreme level. In the highlands of ancient Tibet, Buddhist monks embraced a path of self-sacrifice that demanded not just the offering of life, but the ultimate act of renunciation, a journey that reveals the profound depths of spiritual commitment and the lengths to which humans will go in their quest for enlightenment. Here, the line between the mortal and the divine blurs as individuals willingly give everything in pursuit of spiritual liberation. In the early centuries of Christianity, when the faith was still emerging and often persecuted, a powerful tradition took root, one that would shape the identity of the Church for generations to come. This was the practice of martyrdom, where individuals willingly faced death rather than renounce their beliefs. For these early Christians, martyrdom was not an act of despair but the ultimate expression of faith, a way to bear witness to their devotion and inspire others to follow. But what drove these individuals to such extremes, and how did their sacrifices influence the course of history? At the heart of Christian martyrdom lies the belief in the transformative power of suffering. Drawing from the teachings of Jesus, who himself faced crucifixion, early Christians saw suffering and death as a path to spiritual victory. The word martyr itself comes from the Greek martes, meaning witness. These individuals were not just passive victims, they were active witnesses to their faith, using their deaths as a final, powerful testimony to the truth of their beliefs. For them, martyrdom was not about seeking death but about embracing it with courage and conviction, trusting that their sacrifice would have eternal significance. The cultural and philosophical context of the Roman Empire played a significant role in shaping this practice. In a society where loyalty to the state and its gods was paramount, Christians were often seen as subversive, their refusal to worship the emperor or participate in pagan rituals viewed as a threat to social order. When faced with the choice of renouncing their faith or facing execution, many Christians chose the latter. Their steadfastness in the face of death was not just a personal act of defiance, it was a public declaration of their allegiance to a higher power. This refusal to compromise, even under torture, made martyrs powerful symbols of resistance and resilience. The stories of these martyrs, preserved in texts like the Acts of the Martyrs, are both harrowing and inspiring. Take, for example, the account of Perpetua and Felicity, two women who were arrested in Carthage in the early 3rd century. Despite being new mothers, they refused to renounce their faith, even as they faced wild beasts in the arena. Their courage, documented in Perpetua's own writings, became a source of inspiration for countless Christians, a reminder that faith could triumph even in the darkest moments. These narratives were not just historical records, they were tools of evangelism, spreading the message of Christianity far beyond the Roman Empire. The legacy of Christian martyrdom extends far beyond the ancient world. In modern history, martyrdom has continued to play a role in shaping religious and political movements. During the Reformation, figures like Thomas More and William Tyndale were executed for their beliefs, becoming symbols of resistance against religious oppression. In more recent times, the assassination of figures like Martin Luther King Jr. has been framed as martyrdom, their death serving as a rallying cry for justice and equality. Even today, in regions where Christians face persecution, martyrdom remains a powerful and poignant reality, a testament to the enduring strength of faith in the face of adversity. What's striking about Christian martyrdom is how it intertwines personal devotion with collective identity. For the early church, martyrs were not just individuals, they were symbols of the community's resilience and commitment. Their sacrifices were seen as a way to strengthen the faith of others, to inspire courage, and to affirm the belief that death was not an end but a gateway to eternal life. This idea of martyrdom as a communal act rather than an isolated one highlights the profound ways in which faith can unite people, even in the face of overwhelming opposition. As we reflect on the sacrifices of these early Christians, it's impossible not to see the broader theme of martyrdom as a form of religious devotion. Across cultures and centuries, individuals have given their lives not out of despair but out of a deep belief in something greater than themselves. Whether it's the self-immolation of Buddhist monks, the ritual sacrifices of the Aztecs, or the steadfastness of Christian martyrs, these acts reveal a universal human impulse, the desire to stand for what one believes in, even at the greatest cost. From the arenas of ancient Rome to the modern struggles for justice and freedom, martyrdom continues to resonate as a powerful expression of faith and resistance. It challenges us to consider the lengths to which individuals will go in the name of their beliefs, and how these acts, though often tragic, can inspire hope and transformation. As we continue our exploration of extraordinary martyrdoms, we'll see how this theme of sacrifice as devotion plays out in other cultures and contexts, revealing the timeless and universal nature of humanity's quest for meaning and transcendence. In the heart of ancient Mesopotamia, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers carved paths through fertile plains, the Babylonians built a civilization steeped in grandeur and mysticism. Central to their worldview was the belief that the gods demanded constant reverence and offerings to sustain the balance of the cosmos. For the Babylonians, sacrifice was not merely a ritual, it was a sacred duty, a way to ensure the gods' favor and maintain the fragile harmony of their world. Whether through the blood of animals or, in more solemn instances, the lives of humans, these acts were profound expressions of devotion, designed to bridge the gap between the mortal and the divine. The Babylonians saw the world as a delicate interplay of forces, where the actions of humans directly influenced the will of the gods. To keep this balance intact, they performed elaborate ceremonies, often in the towering ziggurats that served as both temples and cosmic gateways. Animals, particularly sheep, goats, and bulls, were the most common offerings. These creatures were chosen for their symbolic significance: sheep for purity, bulls for strength, and goats for their connection to fertility. The rituals themselves were precise and ceremonial, with priests chanting prayers, burning incense, and carefully preparing the offerings. The blood of the animals, believed to carry the essence of life, was poured over altars or sprinkled on sacred objects, its flow symbolizing the renewal of the bond between humanity and the gods. But the Babylonians also practiced human sacrifice, though these instances were reserved for moments of extreme importance or crisis. Historical records and archaeological evidence suggest that during times of famine, war, or the dedication of a new temple, individuals, often prisoners of war or slaves, were offered to the gods. These sacrifices were not acts of random violence but deeply symbolic gestures, intended to restore cosmic balance and secure divine intervention. The victims were sometimes treated with reverence, their deaths seen as a sacred transformation rather than a tragic end. In some cases, they were even honored as messengers to the gods, their lives given to carry the prayers and needs of the living to the divine realm. The symbolic meaning of these sacrifices extended far beyond the immediate act. For the Babylonians, the act of offering life, whether animal or human, was a way to confront the fragility of existence and the inevitability of death. It was a reminder that life and death were part of a continuous cycle, each feeding into the other. By participating in these ceremonies, the Babylonians sought to align themselves with the rhythms of the natural and spiritual worlds, ensuring their survival and prosperity in a universe governed by forces far beyond their control. What's striking about the Babylonian practice of sacrifice is how it reflects their broader understanding of the cosmos. They believed that the gods were not distant or indifferent but active participants in the world, requiring constant care and devotion. Sacrifices were a way to communicate with these deities, to offer gratitude, seek forgiveness, or ask for protection. The rituals also served to reinforce social and political structures, with kings and priests often presiding over the ceremonies. These public spectacles were not just acts of piety. They were performances of power, reminding the people of their ruler's divine mandate and the importance of collective devotion. As we move from the grand temples of Babylon, we encounter a practice that takes the concept of sacrifice to an even more personal and extreme level. In the highlands of ancient Tibet, Buddhist monks embraced a path of self-sacrifice that demanded not just the offering of life, but the ultimate act of renunciation, a journey that reveals the profound depths of spiritual commitment and the lengths to which humans will go in their quest for enlightenment. Here, the line between the mortal and the divine blurs as individuals willingly give everything in pursuit of spiritual liberation. In the vast tapestry of Islamic history, where faith and devotion intertwine, the concept of martyrdom or shahada holds a place of profound significance. For Muslims, martyrdom is not merely an act of sacrifice, it is the ultimate expression of faith, a way to bear witness to the truth of one's beliefs and to honor Allah. Rooted in the teachings of the Quran and the traditions of the Prophet Muhammad, this practice embodies the belief that giving one's life in the path of God is the highest form of devotion. But what does it truly mean to be a martyr in Islam, and how has this deeply ingrained principle shaped the identity and resilience of the Muslim community? At the heart of Islamic martyrdom lies the concept of jihad, a term often misunderstood but deeply rooted in the faith's spiritual and ethical framework. While jihad is frequently associated with armed struggle, its broader meaning encompasses any effort made in the pursuit of righteousness, whether through personal struggle, charitable acts, or standing up for justice. For a Muslim martyr or shahid, the ultimate jihad is the willingness to sacrifice one's life for the sake of God and the greater good. This act is seen not as an end but as a beginning, a passage to eternal life and divine favor. The Quran promises that martyrs are granted a special place in paradise, their sacrifices ensuring their eternal reward. The cultural and philosophical underpinnings of Islamic martyrdom are deeply tied to the faith's emphasis on selflessness, justice, and the protection of the oppressed. From the early days of Islam, when the fledgling Muslim community faced persecution in Mecca, martyrdom became a powerful symbol of resistance and resilience. Figures like Hamza ibn Abdul Muttalib, the uncle of the Prophet Muhammad, who was martyred at the Battle of Uhud, set a precedent for the valor and sacrifice that would come to define Islamic martyrdom. These early martyrs were not just warriors, they were symbols of unwavering faith, their deaths serving as a rallying cry for the Muslim community. This tradition of martyrdom continued to evolve throughout Islamic history, shaping the identity of the faith in profound ways. During the Crusades, for example, Muslim leaders like Salah ad-Din Saladin invoked the spirit of martyrdom to unite their people against foreign invaders. In more recent times, martyrdom has taken on new dimensions, often tied to political and social struggles. The Iranian Revolution of 1979, for instance, saw countless individuals embrace martyrdom as a form of resistance against oppression, their sacrifices becoming a powerful symbol of the movement's spiritual and ideological fervor. Yet the concept of martyrdom in Islam is not without controversy. In the modern world, it has been co-opted by extremist groups who distort its meaning to justify acts of violence. This misrepresentation has led to widespread misunderstanding, obscuring the true essence of Islamic martyrdom, which is rooted in principles of justice, compassion, and selflessness. For the vast majority of Muslims, martyrdom is not about seeking death but about living a life of purpose and devotion, even if it means facing great peril. It is a reminder that true faith is not passive but active, requiring courage and commitment in the face of adversity. What's striking about Islamic martyrdom is how it intertwines personal devotion with collective identity. For Muslims, martyrs are not just individuals, they are symbols of the community's resilience and commitment to justice. Their sacrifices are seen as a way to strengthen the faith of others, to inspire courage, and to affirm the belief that death is not an end but a gateway to eternal life. This idea of martyrdom as a communal act rather than an isolated one highlights the profound ways in which faith can unite people, even in the face of overwhelming opposition. As we reflect on the sacrifices of Islamic martyrs, it's impossible not to see the broader theme of martyrdom as a form of religious devotion. Across cultures and centuries, individuals have given their lives not out of despair but out of a deep belief in something greater than themselves. Whether it's the early Christian martyrs, the self-immolation of Buddhist monks, or the steadfastness of Sikh martyrs, these acts reveal a universal human impulse, the desire to stand for what one believes in, even at the greatest cost. From the battlefields of early Islam to the modern struggles for justice and freedom, martyrdom continues to resonate as a powerful expression of faith and resistance. It challenges us to consider the lengths to which individuals will go in the name of their beliefs, and how these acts, though often tragic, can inspire hope and transformation. As we continue our exploration of extraordinary martyrdoms, we'll see how this theme of sacrifice as devotion plays out in other cultures and contexts, revealing the timeless and universal nature of humanity's quest for meaning and transcendence. In the heart of ancient Mesopotamia, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers carved paths through fertile plains, the Assyrian Empire rose to power as a force of both military might and religious devotion. For the Assyrians, the world was a delicate balance of divine forces, and maintaining this harmony required more than prayers. It demanded sacrifice. Their rituals, often grand and elaborate, involved the offering of animals and at times human lives, all in service of appeasing the gods and ensuring the stability of their empire. These acts were not mere displays of piety, they were profound expressions of a society's commitment to cosmic order, a way to bridge the gap between the human and the divine. The Assyrians believed that the gods were active participants in their world, influencing everything from the success of their crops to the outcome of their wars. To secure divine favor, they performed sacrifices in sacred spaces, often within the towering walls of their temples. Animals, particularly sheep, goats, and bulls, were the most common offerings chosen for their symbolic significance. A bull, for example, represented strength and fertility, while a lamb symbolized purity and innocence. The rituals were meticulously orchestrated, with priests chanting prayers, burning incense, and carefully preparing the offerings. The blood of the animals, seen as the essence of life, was poured over altars or sprinkled on sacred objects, its flow symbolizing the renewal of the bond between humanity and the gods. But the Assyrians also practiced human sacrifice, though these instances were reserved for moments of extreme importance or crisis. Historical records and archaeological evidence suggest that during times of great upheaval, such as the dedication of a new temple, the coronation of a king, or a military campaign, individuals, often prisoners of war or slaves, were offered to the gods. These sacrifices were not acts of random violence but deeply symbolic gestures, intended to restore cosmic balance and secure divine intervention. The victims were sometimes treated with a strange reverence, their deaths seen as a sacred transformation rather than a tragic end. In some cases, they were even honored as messengers to the gods, their lives given to carry the prayers and needs of the living to the divine realm. The symbolic meaning of these sacrifices extended far beyond the immediate act. For the Assyrians, the act of offering life, whether animal or human, was a way to confront the fragility of existence and the inevitability of death. It was a reminder that life and death were part of a continuous cycle, each feeding into the other. By participating in these ceremonies, the Assyrians sought to align themselves with the rhythms of the natural and spiritual worlds, ensuring their survival and prosperity in a universe governed by forces far beyond their control. What's striking about the Assyrian practice of sacrifice is how it reflects their broader understanding of the cosmos. They believed that the gods were not distant or indifferent but active participants in the world, requiring constant care and devotion. Sacrifices were a way to communicate with these deities, to offer gratitude, seek forgiveness, or ask for protection. The rituals also served to reinforce social and political structures, with kings and priests often presiding over the ceremonies. These public spectacles were not just acts of piety. They were performances of power, reminding the people of their rulers' divine mandate and the importance of collective devotion. As we move from the grand temples of Assyria, we encounter a practice that takes the concept of sacrifice to an even more personal and extreme level. In the highlands of ancient Tibet, Buddhist monks embraced a path of self-sacrifice that demanded not just the offering of life, but the ultimate act of renunciation, a journey that reveals the profound depths of spiritual commitment and the lengths to which humans will go in their quest for enlightenment. Here, the line between the mortal and the divine blurs as individuals willingly give everything in pursuit of spiritual liberation. In the spiritual heart of Hinduism, where the pursuit of enlightenment transcends the boundaries of life and death, there exists a path that demands the ultimate act of renunciation, sannyasa. This ancient practice, often misunderstood as mere asceticism, represents a profound commitment to spiritual liberation. For the sannyasi or renunciant, the goal is not to escape life but to transcend it, shedding all attachments to the material world in pursuit of moksha, or liberation from the cycle of rebirth. Yet for some, this journey of detachment leads to an even more extreme act of self-sacrifice, where the physical body is willingly surrendered in the quest for ultimate spiritual freedom. The roots of sannyasa lie deep within Hindu philosophy, particularly in the teachings of the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita. These texts emphasize the impermanence of the physical world and the eternal nature of the soul. To achieve moksha, one must detach from worldly desires, including the fear of death itself. For the sannyasi, death becomes not an end but a transition, a final release from the illusions of the material world. In some cases, this detachment manifests in the form of prayapavsa, a voluntary fast unto death, undertaken when the body is no longer seen as a useful vessel for spiritual progress. This act is not one of despair but of profound spiritual clarity, a way to embrace the inevitability of death on one's own terms. Historically, sannyasa has been a path chosen by those who feel called to live beyond the confines of societal norms. Renunciants would abandon their homes, families, and possessions, adopting a life of solitude, meditation, and austerity. Yet this path was not without its risks. In times of political or social upheaval, sannyasis often found themselves at the forefront of resistance movements, their spiritual authority giving them a unique platform to challenge oppressive forces. During the British colonial period in India, for example, sannyasis played a key role in the fight against imperial rule, their self-sacrifice becoming a powerful symbol of defiance and spiritual strength. The act of self-sacrifice within sannyasa is also deeply symbolic. In Hinduism, the body is often seen as a temple, a temporary dwelling for the eternal soul. By willingly offering it up, the sannyasi demonstrates their complete surrender to the divine, their ultimate rejection of ego and attachment. This act is not about seeking glory or recognition. It is about embodying the belief that true freedom lies beyond the physical realm. For the sannyasi, death is not a failure but a triumph, a final step in the journey toward unity with the divine. In modern times, the practice of sannyasa continues to inspire, though its manifestations have evolved. While voluntary fasting unto death is rare, the principles of renunciation and detachment remain central to many spiritual seekers. The legacy of the sannyasi reminds us that martyrdom, in its purest form, is not about destruction but about transformation, a way to transcend the limitations of the physical world and connect with something eternal. This idea resonates not just within Hinduism but across spiritual traditions, where the willingness to sacrifice the self has long been seen as a path to enlightenment. As we reflect on the self-sacrifice of the sannyasis, it's impossible not to see the broader theme of martyrdom as a spiritual act. From the early Christian martyrs to the self-immolation of Buddhist monks, these sacrifices reveal a universal human impulse, the desire to transcend the material and unite with the divine. Whether through fasting, fire, or the quiet acceptance of death, these acts challenge us to consider the profound ways in which belief shapes our understanding of life, death, and what lies beyond. From the solitary paths of the sannyasis, we now turn to a practice that, while rooted in a different tradition, shares a similar thread of spiritual devotion. In the icy peaks of the Himalayas, Buddhist monks embraced a path of self-sacrifice that demanded not just the offering of life, but the ultimate act of renunciation, a journey that reveals the profound depths of human commitment to spiritual liberation. In the sun-scorched deserts and fertile valleys of ancient Canaan, the Hebrew people developed a religious tradition that would shape the spiritual landscape for millennia. Central to their faith was the practice of animal sacrifice, a ritual that served as both an act of devotion and a means of maintaining cosmic harmony. These ceremonies were not mere displays of piety. They were profound expressions of a covenant between the Hebrew people and their God, Yahweh. Through the offering of animals, often unblemished lambs, goats, or bulls, the Hebrews sought to atone for sins, express gratitude, and reaffirm their relationship with the divine. At the heart of these sacrifices was the concept of korban, a Hebrew term meaning to draw near. The act of offering an animal was seen as a way to bridge the gap between the human and the divine, to bring the worshipper closer to Yahweh. The rituals were meticulously detailed, with specific instructions laid out in texts like Leviticus. The animal was to be without defect, symbolizing purity and perfection, and its blood, considered the life force, was carefully collected and sprinkled on the altar. This blood was not just a physical substance, it was a sacred medium, believed to carry the prayers and intentions of the people to God. The smoke from the burning offering, rising into the heavens, was seen as a tangible connection between the earthly and the divine. The symbolic meaning of these sacrifices was deeply tied to the Hebrew understanding of sin and atonement. The people believed that wrongdoing disrupted their relationship with Yahweh, creating a rift that could only be healed through repentance and sacrifice. By offering an animal, they were symbolically transferring their guilt or gratitude onto the creature, which then served as a mediator between them and God. This act of substitution was not about the death of the animal, but about the renewal of the covenant, a way to restore balance and harmony in the community and the cosmos. But the Hebrew practice of sacrifice was not just about individual atonement, it was also a communal act. Major festivals such as Passover and Yom Kippur involved large-scale sacrifices that brought the entire community together. These events were not only religious but social, reinforcing the bonds between people and their shared identity as the chosen people of Yahweh. The rituals served as a reminder that their survival and prosperity depended on their faithfulness to the covenant, a relationship that required constant care and devotion. As we reflect on the sacrificial practices of the ancient Hebrews, it's impossible not to see the broader themes of renewal, reciprocity, and connection that run through so many of the rituals we've explored. These acts were not just about the physical offering, they were about the spiritual intent behind it, the desire to maintain a delicate balance between the human and the divine. And while the Hebrew practice of animal sacrifice may seem distant to us today, its legacy endures in the rituals and traditions of faiths that have built upon its foundations. From the symbolic offerings of the Hebrews, we now turn to a final, more extreme form of sacrifice, one that pushes the boundaries of devotion to its utmost limit. In the annals of history, there are moments when individuals have willingly given not just their possessions or their words, but their very lives in acts of self-sacrifice that transcend the ordinary and enter the realm of the extraordinary. These acts, though rare and often shrouded in mystery, reveal the profound depths of human commitment to faith, duty, and the pursuit of something greater than oneself. And as we explore this final example, we'll see how the threads of sacrifice, in all their complexity, continue to weave a tapestry that connects us to the past, the present, and the eternal. In the mystical heart of Islam, where the search for divine love transcends the boundaries of the material world, Sufism emerges as a profound and deeply spiritual tradition. Within this rich tapestry of devotion, there exists a practice that pushes the limits of human commitment to faith, the self-sacrifice of Sufi mystics. These individuals, driven by an unshakable love for the divine, willingly offered their lives as a testament to their belief in the ultimate union with God. This act, known as annihilation of the self, was not about seeking death but about transcending it, dissolving the ego to merge with the eternal. The Sufi path, or tariqa, is one of intense spiritual discipline where the seeker strives to shed all worldly attachments and desires. At its core lies the concept of ishq, or divine love, a force so powerful that it consumes the mystic, leaving no room for the self. For some, this journey of love and surrender culminates in acts of extreme devotion, including self-sacrifice. These mystics saw their lives as offerings to God, a way to demonstrate their complete submission to the divine will. Their deaths were not acts of despair but of ecstasy, a final step in their quest to unite with the beloved. Historically, Sufi martyrdom has taken many forms. In some cases, mystics would undertake perilous journeys or endure extreme ascetic practices, pushing their bodies to the brink in pursuit of spiritual enlightenment. Others, particularly during times of political or religious persecution, chose to face death rather than renounce their faith. One of the most famous examples is the martyrdom of Mansur al-Hallaj, a 10th century Sufi mystic who was executed for his declaration, "Honor al-Haq, I am the truth." His words, seen as heretical by some, were a profound expression of his belief in the unity of all existence with God. For al-Hallaj, death was not a punishment but a fulfillment, a way to transcend the physical and merge with the divine. The cultural and philosophical underpinnings of Sufi martyrdom are deeply rooted in the teachings of Islam, particularly the idea of Tawhid, or the oneness of God. Sufis believe that all creation is a reflection of the divine, and that the ultimate goal of life is to return to this source. Self-sacrifice in this context is seen as a way to break free from the illusions of the material world and achieve true unity with God. This act is not about destruction but about transformation, a way to release the soul from its earthly bonds and allow it to soar into the divine presence. In modern history, the legacy of Sufi martyrdom continues to resonate, particularly in regions where Sufism faces persecution. In places like Pakistan and Afghanistan, Sufi shrines and communities have been targeted by extremist groups, yet the mystics remain steadfast in their devotion. Their resilience in the face of violence is a powerful reminder of the enduring strength of their faith. For many, the sacrifices of these modern-day Sufis are not just acts of personal devotion, but symbols of resistance against oppression, a way to uphold the values of love, tolerance, and unity that lie at the heart of Sufism. As we reflect on the self-sacrifice of the Sufi mystics, it's impossible not to see the broader themes that connect their story to the countless others we've explored. Across cultures and centuries, the willingness to give one's life for faith, for justice, or for a higher cause reveals a universal human impulse, the desire to transcend the limitations of the physical world and connect with something eternal. Whether through the quiet resolve of a Sufi mystic, the fiery defiance of a Christian martyr, or the solemn rituals of ancient civilizations, these acts challenge us to consider the profound ways in which belief shapes our understanding of life, death, and what lies beyond. Now, as we near the end of our journey through 35 extraordinary martyrdoms and sacrificial rites, it's time to step back and reflect on the overarching themes that unite these diverse stories. From the bloodletting rituals of the Maya to the self-immolation of Buddhist monks, from the communal sacrifices of the Aztecs to the solitary devotion of Sufi mystics, one thread runs through them all: the belief that sacrifice in all its forms is a way to bridge the gap between the human and the divine. These acts, though often stark and unsettling, remind us of the lengths to which humanity will go in its search for meaning, connection, and transcendence. They challenge us to consider not just the past but the present, and the timeless questions that continue to shape our world. As we conclude, let's remember that these stories are not just relics of history, they are mirrors reflecting the enduring human quest for something greater than ourselves. Whether through acts of devotion, defiance, or love, sacrifice remains a powerful expression of our deepest hopes and fears, and a reminder that, in the end, it is our shared humanity that binds us all. From the blood-soaked temples of the Aztecs to the serene monasteries of Buddhist monks, we've journeyed through 35 extraordinary examples of martyrdom and sacrificial rites, each a testament to the depth and diversity of human devotion. These practices, though separated by time, geography, and culture, reveal a shared impulse, the desire to transcend the ordinary, to connect with something greater than ourselves. Whether through the fiery spectacle of the Viking funeral pyre, the solemn self-immolation of a Sufi mystic, or the communal offerings of the Maya, these acts remind us that sacrifice has always been a bridge between the mortal and the divine. What unites these practices, despite their vast differences, is their profound symbolism. For some civilizations, sacrifice was a way to ensure survival, offering a life to appease the gods and secure a bountiful harvest or victory in battle. For others, it was a path to spiritual enlightenment, a means of shedding the physical self to achieve unity with the eternal. And in many cases, it was both, an act of devotion that served both the individual and the community, reinforcing social bonds and cosmic order. These rituals were not just about death, they were about renewal, transformation, and the enduring human quest for meaning. But what can we learn from these ancient practices about the human condition? Perhaps it's this, that the need to connect with the sacred, to find purpose beyond the material, is a universal thread woven into the fabric of our existence. These acts of sacrifice, though often extreme and alien to modern sensibilities, challenge us to consider the values and beliefs that drive us. They remind us that faith, whether in gods, ideals, or each other, has the power to inspire acts of extraordinary courage and selflessness even in the face of unimaginable hardship. As we close this chapter on the forgotten civilizations and their sacrificial rites, I invite you to reflect on these stories. What do they tell us about our relationship with the sacred, with each other, and with the world around us? How do they shape our understanding of what it means to be human? Your thoughts and insights are invaluable, so I encourage you to share them in the comments below. Let's continue this conversation and explore the mysteries of our shared past together. If you found this journey as fascinating as I have, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to stay updated on our next deep dive into history's most compelling stories. The past is full of wonders waiting to be uncovered, and I can't wait to explore them with you. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep connecting with the extraordinary stories that remind us of the boundless complexity of humanity. Thank you for watching, and remember, history isn't just about the past, it's a mirror reflecting who we are and who